Today was Ivy's 17th birthday, and her brother Ison had prepared a very special gift for her. It was the Book of the Dead, once buried alongside a mummy, something Ison had traveled all the way to Egypt to find. He knew his sister had been working on a paper about ancient Egypt. Ivy was delighted, though she actually knew very little about Egyptian history. All she knew was that Ramses II, the last great pharaoh, had countless wives and hundreds of sons. Yet in that patriarchal age, there was a woman whose statue stood beside his on the sacred temple walls. That woman was Nefertary, the most beautiful of her time, and the queen Ramses cherished above all others. To Ivy, however, the name just felt too long. Compared to ancient history, she cared far more about the gift her brother had chosen. Ison beckoned her closer and slipped a mysterious golden bracelet, shaped like a serpent, onto her wrist that had been acquired through special channels, along with the Book of the Dead. The moment Ivy saw it, she was captivated. The serpent's eyes glowed with ruby-red gems that seemed to pulse as if alive. Ison, however, dismissed it with a shrug. "It's just a jewel that you're still like a little kid. How can I not worry about you?" He then added, "Once I'm married, I won't have much time to look after you anymore. Mina loves Southern Europe, so after the wedding we'll be moving there." The news struck Ivy's heart like a thunderbolt. Tears streamed down her face as she cried hysterically, begging her brother not to marry. Even though Ison promised that after marriage he would still care for her as always, he had no idea his sister harbored feelings far deeper than ordinary affection. Ivy shoved him away, unable to understand why fate had made him her brother, when her heart yearned for something she could never confess. Her tears fell onto the golden bracelet, and the rubies on the serpent's body began to pulse violently. The bracelet seemed alive. The serpent's mouth opened wide, unleashing waves of golden light. In an instant, the light swallowed Ivy whole. By the time Ison rushed forward, his sister had already vanished. All that remained was the glowing Book of the Dead, where ancient words appeared. "Nile and my mother, she and I drank the water of life together that we vowed to meet again, never forgetting the path to the afterlife." In that patriarchal age, he still chose to carve her statue as tall as his own, and as long as the Nile kept flowing, his devotion to her would never fade. And so, through the serpent-shaped bracelet, Ivy was cast into ancient Egypt. Amid the endless desert sands, she still dreamed of staying with her brother forever. When she opened her eyes again, a red-haired stranger stood before her. The foreign setting and the man's sudden movements filled her with panic. Thankfully, he was only searching her body for weapons. Though his words were in a language she had never heard, Ivy was shocked to realize she could understand every single one. Through their conversation, Ivy learned that the red-haired man was named Montis, while the dark-haired one was called Lita. This was the land of the sun god, Egypt. She couldn't comprehend it. Just a moment ago she had been in London, and her only knowledge of Egypt was that the pharaoh's most beloved queen was Nefertary. Muttering to herself, she failed to notice Lita's question that he mistook Nefertary as her name and sincerely asked if she could help him with something. But Ivy only wanted to go home. She had no intention of staying here any longer. The hot-tempered Montis suddenly hoisted her onto his shoulder, ignoring her frantic resistance. From the moment he saw her golden hair and blue eyes, he was convinced Ivy could serve his plans. Despite her struggles, he tossed her onto a horse without hesitation. Soon after, they arrived at their capital, Thebes. Only then did Ivy realize this was not modern Egypt at all, but ancient Egypt. A magnificent city long lost to history, once the kingdom of pharaohs in life and their eternal resting place in death. The thought struck her hard. Could it be that she would never return home? Before she could recover from the shock, two maidservants seized her by the arms. Lita ordered them to wash her thoroughly, for the prince himself would be attending the banquet tonight. From the maidservants, Ivy learned that Montis had been named a general by the pharaoh himself at only 20, commanding vast armies and boasting countless victories. Lita, meanwhile, was the youngest prophet in the capital and a priest of the great temple. As night fell, the grand feast of ecstasy began. The prince's arrival sent waves of astonishment through the gathered maidens. With bronzed skin and a faint, confident smile, Prince Bifatu was without doubt the star of the banquet. "Where is the maiden blessed by the goddess happy? Since my father is not here, tonight we shall drink until dawn." Yet the moment Ivy entered, every gaze turned toward her. The golden hair, the sapphire blue eyes, a brilliance unlike anything in this land. Even Prince Bifetu found himself unable to look away, while Montes questioned if this dazzling girl was truly the same wild stranger he had casually brought along. Suddenly, General Tata lunged forward, loudly demanding that she drink with him. Ivy recoiled in panic. She stepped on her own gown and nearly fell, but strong arms caught her. The firmness of his chest against her made her flush with heat. This prince still lacks a companion. General Tata, you'd best find another. As the banquet went on, Ivy noticed everyone flocking around General Tata with toasts, while the prince himself was left in the shadows. Even Montes and Lita kept their eyes fixed on her, remembering the plan they had mentioned earlier. Ivy grew more uneasy. What exactly were they plotting? But when her gaze shifted back to Bifetu, she was startled to find his eyes colder than ice, chilling her to the core. But the moment his eyes met Ivy's, Prince Bifetu's expression softened. Leaning in close with a playful smile, he asked her name. Those striking amber eyes left Ivy momentarily dazed, and in her trance she blurted out a false name, Nefertary. Bifetu seemed pleased, both with her and the name that he declared she would stay at his side, and only then did Ivy realize she had been sitting on his lap all along. Flushing scarlet, she tried to slip away, but Bifetu's hand gripped hers firmly. Rising to his feet, he stood tall like a king, announcing that the true purpose of this gathering was not mere celebration. At that moment, a wine-filled goblet slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Without warning, Montes appeared behind General Tata. His blade flashed and the general collapsed, lifeless. Montes immediately commanded his men to seize control. This entire banquet had been a trap, orchestrated by Bifetu to purge traitors. He declared that these men had oppressed the innocent and even conspired with enemy nations to sell weapons. Bifetu ordered them all to be exiled. One elder protested, insisting they were ministers appointed by the Pharaoh himself and could only be judged upon the Pharaoh's return. Bifetu's voice turned cold. Then you shall meet execution now that I am the son of the king, and under Egyptian law, I have the right to strike down traitors without delay. Cornered, one desperate traitor pulled a dagger and lunged at him. Bifetu shielded Ivy with one arm and drew his own blade with the other. Parrying the attack, he drove his sword straight into the man's chest, vowing that as long as he lived, no innocent would suffer again. Ivy shoved Bifetu away, pleading with him to stop. She could see the man was already in unbearable pain. But Bifetu's resolve did not waver. To defy the royal family was an unforgivable crime, and he ordered the man's entire clan be executed. Once the matter was settled, Bifetu casually instructed the guests to continue drinking and dancing. Watching life snuffed out so easily, while the prince acted as if nothing had happened, Ivy felt sick to her stomach. How could he be so cruel? All she wanted was to escape this place she could not accept. In her panic, she ran headlong into Lita, colliding with his chest. She begged him to take her home, but he refused coldly. You promised. You said after the banquet you'd send me back. How can you go back on your word? At that moment, Bifetu wrapped his arms around her from behind, whispering, Wouldn't it be better to stay and drink with me? Ivy struggled desperately, shouting, If you dare touch me, Ison will never forgive you. The next second, something cold pressed against Ivy's lips. Who is Ison, your husband? Bifetu whispered darkly. A modern girl hurled back 3,000 years into ancient Egypt. Her golden hair and sapphire eyes made her the center of attention. Yet here her very first kiss was stolen by a prince. Worse still, she was kept as his caged songbird, imprisoned in luxury, a life she despised. In this world with no television, no internet, and nothing familiar, endless time meant nothing when she could do nothing with it. Her constant gloom weighed heavily on Bifetu that he couldn't understand what was so terrible about staying by his side. But what he didn't know was that Ivy did not belong to this world, nor did she want any tie to this ruthless prince. As her thoughts churned, she caught sight of Lita speaking with a servant and rushed toward him. You promised me after the banquet you'd let me go, and now an entire month has passed, she demanded. But as Bifetu's most loyal supporter, Lita refused to release her, instead droning on with endless praise for the prince. I still have to deal with the peasant uprising, that I'll take my leave, Lita said flatly before walking away. But wasn't this exactly the topic of Ivy's research paper? She casually voiced a few of her ideas, leaving Lita utterly dumbfounded. If the uprisings are because they're starving, Then why not give them the wages meant for hired craftsmen? Build less during the busy farming season and more during the idle months. That way, slaves wouldn't be worked to death and farmers wouldn't starve into rebellion. With the fertile soil from the Nile's floods, they could survive. But if drought strikes and harvests fail, the farmers have no livelihood. That if they could serve the state and receive proper payment, the problem could be solved. Ivy spoke with enthusiasm, never noticing that Bifitu and the others had been standing behind her, listening the entire time. An elder courtier rushed forward, demanding to know where Ivy had heard such things. For what she had just said was precisely the national policy Egypt was about to announce, knowledge that even many of the court's ministers did not yet know. The courtier moved to press her further, but Bifitu stepped in front, shielding her. After the others withdrew, Bifitu finally spoke. The pharaoh has wrestled with this issue for years, shifting from suppression of the peasants to offering them relief. This policy was only finalized yesterday. How is it that you know it so well? Ivy gave no answer. She only begged softly, asking Bifitu to let her return home. Since Ivy knew so much about Egypt, how could Bifitu possibly let her go? For the next 60 days, the Nile goddess will bless us with fertile soil. To honor her grace, Egypt will hold a grand festival. And on that day I will take you as my first consort. Though I have no chief queen yet, having a consort is good enough. After the festival, you will be mine. Take pride in that. More than 20 days passed in a blur. Lita told Ivy that tomorrow was the day of the Nile's flood. To thank the goddess, a grand celebration would be held. As Lita spoke dreamily about the spectacle to come, Ivy suddenly interrupted, asking who the current pharaoh was. Her question left Lita baffled. He wondered which remote village she had crawled out from, to not even know of the great Pharaoh Seti. The name struck Ivy as familiar. She had seen it in history books. But even after studying history for 2.5 years, she couldn't place exactly which era this was. She felt a stab of regret. She should have studied harder back then. Seeing her so clueless, Lita reminded her kindly, "Tomorrow Prince Bifitu will announce your marriage. Are you not nervous at all?" But Ivy wasn't worried. Even if Bifitu insists on marrying me, surely the pharaoh won't allow it. After all, marriage here was nothing but a tool for royal power. As the son of the pharaoh and future heir, Bifitu's best choice would be a political marriage with a neighboring kingdom, not taking in a mysterious girl as his bride. Her composure and sharp reasoning made Lita view her in a new light. After all, the matter had already caused a storm of debate, not only among the council but even reaching the pharaoh himself. Even though the ministers opposed him on every front, Bifitu refused to yield. With wars raging outside, he knew full well that marrying a powerful princess would strengthen Egypt's position. Yet deep down he felt that if he didn't wed Ivy soon, she might vanish from his side forever, never to be seen again. Thus, there was no room for compromise, even if it meant defying his father's will. The ministers grew ever more curious. What kind of woman could drive the prince to such obsession? Meanwhile, Ivy was still desperately plotting her escape. She had tried sneaking out of the palace several times, only to be caught each time by soldiers. The thought of becoming that man's consort made her head spin. She and Bifitu were never meant to cross paths. 3,000 years later, everything about her would fade into nothing but hieroglyphs on a pyramid wall. And she who had borrowed the name Nefertary, what would she count for then? Staring down at the rolling Nile beneath her feet, Ivy suddenly thought, if she leapt, would it all finally end? But Bifitu arrived in time, shattering that desperate impulse. He seized her possessively, lifting her into his arms, and after a fervent confession, revealed his unyielding claim over her. At last, Bifitu presented her with a golden serpent bracelet, specially crafted, utterly unique, his gift to her alone. The reason Ivy had been sent back 3,000 years to ancient Egypt in the first place was because of this very golden serpent bracelet. She was certain now, it had to be the key to time itself. If she wore it again, could it take her home? On this day, Egypt's grandest festival unfolded. The pharaoh stood upon the altar, giving thanks to the goddess of the Nile. The goddess bestowed her gifts equally, without favoritism. The honeycomb-like fertile soil she granted was more precious than gold or silver. Gazing at the overwhelming spectacle, Ivy was awestruck. No book she had ever read could compare to the magnificence before her eyes. Just then, Bifitu made his resplendent entrance. Drawing her attention at once, he asked why she was hiding here. Before Ivy could answer, he stepped forward and seized her hand. "Today I'll show you the glory of Egypt, its unmatched might." Ignoring her resistance, he led her straight onto the altar. With his dramatic arrival, the crowds erupted in thunderous cheers. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the roar of the people. Ivy realized with shock that Bifetu truly held the unwavering devotion of his subjects. Beloved by the people, Bifetu also won the pharaoh's deep approval. The pharaoh beckoned his son to come forward. Bifetu knelt on one knee, offering his father the highest salute and congratulating him on his victorious return. The pharaoh smiled, saying, "When I ascend as a god, this great Egypt will be entrusted to you. Feel the roar of the people's devotion. Guard this land well, expand our borders and strengthen our nation." Seizing the auspicious day, the pharaoh brought up marriage. "I hear you intend to take a foreign girl as a consort, that I do not wholly oppose it. But before that, you must first marry noble women of firm standing." With a wave of his hand, he signaled Bifetu to follow him. On this day of celebration, everyone offered blessings, expecting Bifetu to take his bride. Yet Ivy felt an unexplainable pang in her chest. By all logic, this was the best outcome. He would become pharaoh of Egypt and wed a noble princess. And she, with the golden serpent bracelet, could abandon all this and return to her brother's side. But when she recalled Bifetu's promises to her, Ivy's heart grew restless. Who would he truly marry, and why did she care so much? After asking a maid where the banquet hall was, she quietly slipped in. The young woman at the center of attention was the daughter of Pharaoh's trusted minister, Heman. While everyone assumed she was meant for Bifetu, the pharaoh instead betrothed her to the fourth prince. Bifetu seemed utterly indifferent, his mind was far from marriage. He was only wondering what Ivy was doing at that moment. But then another young woman appeared, instantly capturing the attention of everyone present. Her graceful figure glided into the hall. Her flowing violet hair and poised demeanor radiated nobility. Even with her hands bound, her dignity remained unshaken. Even Ivy couldn't help but marvel at her beauty. She was Nefertary, the 17th princess of the Hittite kingdom. To escape her father's arranged marriage, she fled to the border, only to be caught in a skirmish and captured by the pharaoh. Now she was to be bestowed upon Bifetu as his bride, the most beautiful princess of Egypt's rival nation. Yet she had fallen so low, reduced to a prisoner with shackled hands, forced to marry the pharaoh's most beloved son. Once the exalted 17th princess of the Hittites, she had run from one unwanted marriage only to be thrust into another with a foreign prince. Her only thought now was death. But as a captive, how could the pharaoh ever grant her such freedom? Even as Nefertary hurled insults and defiance, the pharaoh remained unmoved. His intent was clear: to make the enemy princess his son's concubine, to prove Egypt's eternal supremacy over its neighbors, to one day grind every kingdom beneath its heel. But Nefertary's heart yearned only for death, that if word spread that she had become a consort of the Egyptian court, it would bring shame upon her homeland. Realizing this, the Hittite princess wept bitterly, her tears falling like rain as despair swallowed her whole. The hall echoed with praise for Egypt's might, and cheers for the prince who would soon marry the most beautiful princess. But Bifetu's expression had turned dark and foreboding. He had no desire to wed this foreign princess. In truth, he wished his father would use her as a bargaining chip to trade for a few cities. Yet to the pharaoh, such cities were worthless in his eyes. Even the entire Hittite kingdom would eventually fall beneath Egypt's rule. Torn between rejecting a bride he didn't want, his longing for Ivy, and his father's decree, Bifetu was trapped in a painful dilemma. Hidden in the crowd, Ivy witnessed everything. Slavery, the worship of monarchs, the rituals, the grand architecture, scenes she had never dreamed of seeing with her own eyes. If I could tell Ison about this, he'd be astonished. The key is in my hand. Why am I still hesitating? After a moment's thought, Bifetu extended his hand, symbolically accepting Nefertary. From that instant, she was declared his concubine. Thunderous cheers shook the hall, and Ivy, shaken by the scene, put on the golden serpent bracelet, hoping to return home. But nothing happened. No matter how long she waited, she remained where she was. Could it be, I can't go back? Her restless movements caught Bifetu's sharp eye. The moment he spotted her, Ivy bolted in panic, fleeing the hall. Bifetu immediately gave chase, his powerful strides closing the distance in moments. He seized Ivy and demanded to know why she had disguised herself among the emissaries. Ivy didn't answer directly, she only said softly, "The Hittite princess is very beautiful." Her calm expression cut deep into Bifitu's heart. "Do you not feel even a little uneasy? Not even wish that I wouldn't marry her?" he asked. But Ivy's reply shattered him. "I don't understand what you expect from me. We were never meant to meet." To Bifitu, this was unbearable that he was willing to give her everything, yet he could not fathom why she was so desperate to escape him. As they quarreled, the golden serpent bracelet on Ivy's wrist suddenly blazed with light. The glow grew stronger and Ivy realized she was about to be sent away. A surge of dread overwhelmed Bifitu that he rushed forward, desperate to hold her, but in the next instant, Ivy vanished into the blinding light. By the bracelet's power, Ivy was pulled back into the future. When she opened her eyes, the first faces she saw were her beloved brother and father. And yet, her heart remained trapped, unable to break free from the memories of ancient Egypt. When she saw how haggard her brother Ison looked, Ivy's heart ached with guilt and tenderness. Their father anxiously demanded to know where she had been for the past week. Ivy was stunned. She had spent months in ancient Egypt, yet here only a single week had passed? Quietly, she slipped the golden serpent bracelet from her wrist and hid it behind her back. The secret of her journey to Egypt was something she chose not to reveal. After all, such an unbelievable story would never be accepted. It would only make her family worry needlessly. As life returned to normal, Ivy often found her thoughts drifting back to Bifitu. If he had truly become Pharaoh, what kind of ruler would he have been? A proud and battle-hardened man like him. Surely his reign would have been one of prosperity. Yet for some reason she could never find his name in the history books. Worry gnawed at her. Had Bifitu ever ascended as Pharaoh? Or was he nothing more than a forgotten prince, erased from history? Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the interviewer. Ivy stepped forward and offered a polite bow. She began to speak about her views on ancient Egypt, recounting Bifitu's valor. Memories burned into her mind from what she had witnessed with her own eyes. Those breathtaking scenes, she knew she would carry them with her for the rest of her life. When the professors asked her about the differences between ancient Egypt's economic system and traditional feudal societies, Ivy's confident response left them stunned. In ancient Egypt, slaves remained the primary productive force, making it a textbook slave-based economy. Small-scale individual economies could never decisively alter the larger structure. When they learned that the girl before them was only 17, the professors murmured in disbelief. If Ivy passed today's interview, she would receive an early admission letter from a prestigious university. She understood her father's worries, but she still lacked the courage to share with him the truth of her extraordinary experience. All she wanted was a fresh start once she entered college. After conferring among themselves, the interviewers asked Ivy what she thought of the glory of Ramses II. Since the professors were economic specialists, as long as her answer wasn't too far-fetched, they likely wouldn't press her. So Ivy spoke of what she had truly seen. An unassailable military strength, built on overwhelming force to conquer the surrounding nations. Next came enlightened trade and material exchange, as Egypt received jewels and treasures from emissaries of foreign lands. From prisoners of war, they gained advanced technologies, fueling massive construction projects that cemented the pharaoh's unshakable authority. Religion was also deftly used to control the populace and slaves, while political marriages further secured the throne. It was said that Ramses II, during his 90-plus years of life, took over 200 wives, each union further strengthening his rule. But Ivy's account was abruptly interrupted by one of the professors. While they praised her essay highly, they questioned her historical accuracy. For this was a matter of scholarly integrity. Historically, Ramses II died less than 2 years after succeeding Seti I. In truth, he had only 3 wives: the Hittite princess Nejeru, his priestess sister, and another foreign princess, Nefertary, who also died young. A man who should have brought boundless prosperity to Egypt instead perished within 2 short years of becoming pharaoh, all because of the departure of one girl. Ivy's unexpected intrusion had rewritten the history of ancient Egypt. Back in the modern world, upon learning this truth, she could never fully come to terms with the ending. She ran through the rain like someone possessed, her heart pounding in desperation. She tore through history books, searching frantically for traces of Bifitu. How could the man destined for countless victories vanish so quietly from history? At last she found a fleeting mention of his name. Had his brief reign not ended just 2 years after his coronation, his achievements would have far surpassed those of his father, Seti I, and secured him eternal glory. In the murals and records he left behind, only 3 wives were ever noted. Nedru, the Hittite princess captured during Seti I's campaign, his sister, chosen by the priests, and his most beloved foreign princess, Nefertary. In every temple he built, wherever his likeness was carved, Nefertary's image stood beside him. Upon the stone walls was etched the vow, "Each day the sun rises because of you." Bifitu's love for her was profound and unwavering, yet her departure had become the very cause of his untimely death. But if she herself was Nefertary, then where had the real Nefertary gone? She could never truly understand what had happened to Bifitu. With her heart in ruins, Ivy staggered through the rain like a lost soul, her mind consumed by Bifitu and the history she had so carelessly altered. It wasn't until the next day inside a beauty salon that Ivy emerged from a makeover fully prepared. A tactical flashlight capable of blinding an enemy for seconds, a spray that could knock someone unconscious when aimed at the eyes and nose, night vision goggles and signal flares. Even an AK rifle loaded with bullets. More than enough for self-defense. She knew deep down, if she didn't go back to save that ruthless yet devoted prince, she could never live peacefully in this world. Stripping someone of 70 years of life was simply inhumane. Clutching the golden serpent bracelet, Ivy felt her hesitation vanish. She would return to ancient Egypt, to let the real Nefertary meet him and become his bride. To let Bifitu become the true Ramses II. And this time, she would only act as a bystander, fighting with all her might to restore history to its rightful path. With a flash of radiant light, the gears of fate began to turn once more. He was the new king of Egypt. His breathtaking beauty enough to make maidens across the land swoon. Many young women dreamed that if they were granted the king's favor, their beauty might earn them a special place at his side. Yet, without exception, after a single night of passion, the man would dismiss them with a cold command, "Leave." The rumors were true. Any girl who clung to fantasies after being favored by the pharaoh would soon meet a mysterious death. Returning again to ancient Egypt, Ivy soon encountered the younger brother of Montes. Seeing his dark Egyptian skin, she hurriedly asked him about Bifitu. When she learned that Bifitu had ascended the throne only 3 days earlier, Ivy's anxious heart finally eased. But the journey from here to Thebes, where Bifitu's court was, would take more than 10 days. Fortunately, Bifitu was currently residing in the palace at Memphis. And since Buka was also traveling to Memphis in search of his elder brother, the two decided to embark on the journey together. Elsewhere, after an intimate encounter, Bifitu received Montes, who had come to deliver urgent news. Before Montes could even speak, Bifitu said calmly, "The Libyans have stirred at the border and Giza has failed to send reinforcements, just as I expected." He gave a cold smile. "So, my brother, she has finally succumbed to temptation and betrayed us." Sitting gracefully beneath the moonlight, Bifitu's poise was so striking that even Montes found himself momentarily entranced. Snapped back to reality when addressed, Montes quickly bowed. "Your Highness, word from my younger brother. The Libyans have not advanced on Memphis. He says this is no mere border raid. Giza has already defected. Troops must be dispatched swiftly. And he urges, please, Pharaoh must not ride out personally. This rebellion is far more dangerous than it seems." Montes carefully presented the letter Buka had sent. "My brother is still young. If his words are presumptuous, I beg your pardon." Reading the note, Bifitu chuckled. The pharaoh must never leave Memphis in pursuit of glory. Such bold words. Yet he did not grow angry. Instead, he mused aloud, "For your brother to show such insight. If he is as loyal as you, then I would gladly keep him close, but if not..." Montes interrupted, declaring loudly, "My family of Sitak has been loyal to you for generations, my lord. My brother is no exception. To serve you even once would be the greatest honor of his life." "Good." Bifitu's smile deepened. "When this is over, I shall summon him. For now, you remain here in Memphis. I will lead only a small force to Mulan Mulei. This operation must remain utterly secret." What puzzled Montes most was that his king clearly knew this was a trap. Yet Bifitu gave no direct reply. Instead, he instructed firmly, "Guard Memphis well. If my prediction is correct, unrest will break out soon." It could be traitors stirring the people or the Hittite army seizing the chance to invade. You must be prepared for either. I'll leave you the strongest troops. And beware of food in the coming days. The risk of poison is high. No one must know that I've left Memphis." Witnessing such trust placed upon him, Montes was deeply moved. "Rest assured, my lord. I will protect Memphis with my life and await your triumphant return." Meanwhile, Ivy, for the first time, saw the devastation war could bring. Bodies, blood, and the cries of the dying, the cruelty of it all nearly broke her. She wondered bitterly, was this God's punishment for me meddling with history? But if so, why punish not just me but countless innocents in such a cruel way? After the sorrow subsided, Ivy clenched her fists. She vowed that she would do everything in her power to protect the villagers who had survived. The power of Ivy's words rekindled the spirit of the once despairing Buka. He recalled his brother's words. The Pharaoh was a man of rare charisma, able to sway hearts with the simplest of words, commanding loyalty unto death. If Ivy were his master, Buka thought, he too would gladly give his all. Those wise, sapphire-blue eyes seemed to radiate endless hope. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, General Scarface gnawed hungrily on a roasted chicken leg. A scout reported that the Pharaoh had sent troops to Memphis. Surely it must now be an empty city. That was the true purpose of their ploy, to draw out the Pharaoh's forces. If the plan succeeded, Scarface would claim a princess as his bride and rise to glory. But he had no idea that the entire rumor was a ruse planted by Ivy, meant to intimidate them and buy time for the villagers to escape. Watching the peasants stroll past so brazenly, the general hesitated, unwilling to make a rash move. After all, his goal was already achieved. Safeguarding his own skin mattered more than wading into unnecessary trouble. Suddenly, however, another scout rushed in, reporting that the Pharaoh had never dispatched troops to rescue Mula village. Realizing he had been played for a fool, Scarface flew into a rage, vowing to butcher the villagers into mince. In an instant, his army thundered forward, and the helpless villagers scattered in terror. In the chaos, everyone thought only of saving themselves. Though Ivy shouted desperately to rally them, the enemy was already upon them, and she was knocked to the ground by fleeing villagers. Buka rushed to lift her, urging her to run. But how could human legs ever outrun the thundering charge of war horses? Watching enemy blades cut down all in their path, Ivy's heart filled with despair. She had returned to Egypt to mend history, yet instead more innocent lives were being lost because of her. Was I wrong again? Just then, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Bifitu had arrived, leading his mighty army. She remembered the younger Bifitu with his restless temper and unrestrained pride. But the man before her now felt utterly unfamiliar. His face carried only the aura of a true king. And with a single command from the Pharaoh of Egypt, the formations fell into place with flawless discipline. Soldiers fought with fearless valor. In moments, the tide of battle had turned. Bifitu's mastery of warfare was godlike, and Ivy witnessed firsthand the true might of Egypt. Yet after 5 long years, when they met again, Bifitu did not recognize Ivy. She was no longer the sweet golden-haired girl he once knew. Her skin was darkened, her hair cut short and dyed blue. She had even gone so far as to spray her skin darker for disguise. Not even her own father would recognize her now, let alone Bifitu. And the man before her felt equally unfamiliar. Though his eyes and nose were the same, his entire being radiated only coldness. The passionate prince who once blazed like the desert sun had become an icy, distant king. Could time truly change a person so completely? When he learned that Ivy was the one who had delivered the letter, Bifitu demanded to know why she had written those words. Ivy answered honestly, the raid was nothing but a diversion. Their true aim was to draw away Memphis's main forces. At her words, Bifitu's lips curved faintly. Then tell me, what do you think my next move should be? Faced with his probing test, Ivy could not hesitate. She needed to remain at his side, and this was her chance to earn his trust. The Libyan army you just defeated, she said firmly, was nothing more than bait. They must have allied with other forces. This raid was only bait, to lure away our strongest troops, then ignite rebellion within Memphis itself, striking Egypt at its heart. Bifitu was deeply impressed by Ivy's insight. Admiring her talent, he began to consider her service to Egypt. Slowly, he shared a memory from his childhood. When I was young, I raised a lion cub that I adorned it with gold and jewels, lavished it with care as though it were my own blood. But during a festival, it turned savage, mauling my servants, then lunging at me, its master. Though I had poured my heart into raising it, its betrayal left me no choice that I severed its head without hesitation. His eyes sharpened, voice edged with warning. Yet such things do not stop me from generosity. Tell me, Ivy, what do you desire? So long as you serve Egypt, I will grant it. Do not be like that lion. Serve loyally and no reward will be beyond your reach. But if ever you harm my kingdom's interests, I will destroy you without mercy. What he did not know was that Ivy had already pledged her heart to Egypt. Her return was for one purpose alone, to protect Bifitu and restore the course of history. Betray you, never to walk at your side is the greatest reward I could ever wish for. The past is nothing but dust in the wind. Quietly, she told herself, all she needed to do was stand as a bystander and guide history back to its rightful path. Besides, Bifitu no longer remembered her. Wasn't that exactly what she had wished for? And yet, why did her heart ache so terribly? Ivy once again returned to ancient Egypt, this time marching with Bifitu's army toward Thebes. When her eyes fell upon the majestic capital, she could not help but marvel. The fabled city of 100 gates, after 5 long years, had risen anew, more magnificent, more overwhelming in its grandeur. Yet to everyone's surprise, Bifitu had sent no aid to Memphis. Instead, he returned straight to Thebes. Bold in strategy yet cautious in action, he trusted his men but always kept a safeguard in place. Ivy puzzled over it endlessly. What twist of fate could cause such a brilliant leader to meet an early death? To her astonishment, 5 years had also left no trace upon Lita, that he remained as flawless and beautiful as ever. As Bifitu strode toward his throne, Ivy instinctively moved to follow. Thankfully, Buka tugged her back just in time, sparing the court from a shocking spectacle. Lita stepped forward to report. General Montes has successfully crushed the rebellion. The instigator was none other than the Western Prince of Giza. The court erupted into uproar, but with a single wave of Bifitu's hand, silence returned. All eyes fixed on the king, awaiting his decree. The Western Prince consorted with enemies and raised arms against his own people. His crime is treason. Send word to General Montes. March at once on Giza, seize him, and if he resists, strike him down. Dotri, I appoint you governor of Giza. You will depart immediately, join the army at Memphis and oversee the campaign. The new governor of Giza must promote open trade, to ease the path for future merchants. With this single decree, Bifitu revealed his vision as a ruler. Even Ivy, well-versed in history, could not help but marvel. To his own kin he showed no mercy. To his ministers, no matter how young or untested, he would grant office if they had talent. Those favored would feel grateful, while the rest would be inspired. At the same time, every gesture reinforced the pharaoh's authority, consolidating power firmly in his hands. One more matter, Bifitu said. The season of the Nile's flood is near. How should we employ the idle farmers? Ivy, I wish to hear your counsel. Following his gaze, Lita's eyes fell upon Ivy and he murmured in shock, Nefertary. The terror in his eyes was not lost on Ivy. Had he recognized me? The court erupted in whispers. Clearly the name Nefertary was one known to all. Ivy froze in place at a loss for words. Only when Bifitu's voice cut coldly through the noise did she stir. On the matter of the Nile's flooding, can you give no answer? Reflexively, Ivy repeated the same solution she had spoken of 5 years before. But inside her heart twisted, the same words, the same tone, and yet Bifitu has forgotten it all. Everything I once said, everything I once did, does he truly remember nothing? In this kingdom, every foreign maiden with golden hair was ordered slain by the pharaoh. All of it was born of Bifitu's obsession with Ivy. His longing had turned to madness. I end the 5 years since her disappearance, he had searched for her relentlessly. As heir to the throne, Bifitu had grown up amid the intrigues of the palace. Schooled in the art of survival. In his eyes, there was no longer any truth. Everything was veiled in schemes and interests. Each evening as the sun god sank beneath the Nile, he would sit alone by the lotus pond, brooding over the next move upon his chessboard. But since Ivy's sudden appearance and her sudden vanishing, he had never again been truly alone. By day he buried himself in affairs of state and in raising the monuments he loved. By night, nameless women filled the endless hours. And now, as he sat once more at the lotus pond, was it because he had finally let go of that consuming love? The chess pieces lay scattered across the table. Bifita drew in a deep breath. For 5 years he had searched every corner of Thebes, every village nourished by the Nile. Whenever rumor spoke of a foreign girl who resembled her, no matter his duties, he would rush to see with his own eyes. He vented his fury on all around him, banishing Nidru to the cold palace, refusing to wed any other bride. He even defied his father's arranged marriages. He forbade all ruby-inlaid serpent bracelets, burning through every passion, exhausting every means in his desperate quest to find her. To Bifitu she was like a phantom reflected upon water. No matter how desperately he sought, she always slipped beyond his grasp. Those fleeting months together had become a memory he would savor for a lifetime. For the first time in 5 years he dared to sit alone and embrace the solitude of night. For from this day onward his thoughts would once again turn to that girl. Elsewhere, Ivy suddenly sneezed for no reason. Strange, why sneeze in such sweltering heat, she wondered. At that moment, Buka had been trailing a suspicious maid and managed to snatch from her a peculiar clay tablet. In Egypt, writing was almost always on papyrus. Only the Hittites used clay tablets. The inscription suggested that someone within the palace was secretly colluding with the Hittites, plotting harm against the pharaoh. Perhaps the so-called rebellion was only one piece of a larger lure away the tiger stratagem. But if it was merely the Western prince's alliance with Libya, why then was a Hittite tablet involved? What struck Ivy as most suspicious was how carelessly the maid had lost something so important. And now, by some twist of fate, that crucial clay tablet had ended up in the hands of someone as unremarkable as Buka. In any nation, in any age, conspiring against the ruler was a crime punishable by death. Those daring enough to attempt such treachery would surely take every precaution. Never would they be so careless with their messages. To her surprise, Ivy discovered a lotus crest engraved upon the clay tablet. The lotus was Egypt's most cherished flower, yet here it was, etched upon a Hittite tablet. More troubling still, it bore the mark of a personal seal, one that represented its owner's identity. Why would a secret letter, meant to remain hidden, be boldly stamped with its sender's own seal? Ivy's head throbbed from the spiraling questions. Just then, a heavy knock came at the door. A maid arrived with a message. The pharaoh himself had invited Ivy to a grand celebration 3 days hence. Such a gathering of nobles and dignitaries would be the perfect chance for Ivy to seek answers and trace the source of the conspiracy. And so, for the first time, Ivy shed her disguise, removing the wig to reveal her golden hair and fair, radiant skin. Since her return to ancient Egypt, Ivy had marched alongside the pharaoh's army, enduring the unbearable heat while carefully concealing her true identity as a girl. She had never intended to disguise herself as a boy, but foolish Buka from the very first meeting had treated her as one. Now to suddenly declare she was female would seem far too strange. Glancing at her skin pale once more, Ivy realized with alarm that her darkening spray was almost gone. She would have to use up the last of it on her face today. Thinking back on all that had happened, she admitted she had overestimated herself. Had Bifitu not arrived at Muley in time, she would surely have died. What had truly claimed his young life? What connection did it have to her? She did not know, only that she longed to save him. Just then, Buka burst in without hesitation, calling out, "Ivy, the pharaoh's banquet is about to begin." But the sight before him stopped him cold, the beauty bathing in the water. Ivy, flustered, immediately sank beneath the surface. Buka bolted like a startled colt, fleeing down the corridor, his heart hammering wildly. He had often thought to himself, if only Ivy were a girl. Never had he dreamed she truly was. Remembering the scene, he nearly coughed up blood. This is bad. How am I supposed to face her now? Once Ivy had composed herself, she scarcely had time to dwell on whether her secret as a girl had been discovered before night fell. The pharaoh's grand banquet began in full splendor. The moment she entered, Ivy was swept into its dazzling extravagance, truly befitting a feast to mark the 70th day of the pharaoh's reign. But suddenly, a chilling gaze pressed against the back of her neck. She turned sharply, only to find nothing there. The cold dread clung to her like a serpent coiling around her throat. Fortunately, the arrival of Queen Nidru pulled her thoughts back to the present. For reasons she could not explain, the memory of Bifetu wedding Nidru as his consort still haunted her, etched into her mind as if carved in stone. As Nidru entered, the hall murmured with sighs. Once arrogant and proud, she was now subdued, ever since she had been cast into the cold palace. Beauty alone could not withstand the weight of lost favor. The next queen's arrival, however, caught Ivy's attention, for it was a name she had never heard before. She quickly asked Buka who the princess was. The boy's cheeks flushed red as he stammered, "That is Prince Bifetu's sister. She was a famed priestess of Egypt, said to converse with the gods themselves. It was through a minister's recommendation that Bifetu took her as his bride. This maiden had wed her brother, and in doing so, bound herself more tightly to him through marriage." The very thought made Ivy's chest ache with unshakable pain. A man marrying his own sister was nothing more than a means to harness religion for political control. For in distant ancient Egypt, the people believed both the land and the pharaoh were blessed by the gods. And his sister was said to be the maiden who could commune with the divine, Egypt's most exalted priestess. At the pharaoh's banquet, the moment Bifetu appeared, the atmosphere surged to its peak. With graceful poise, he raised his goblet high, declaring that on this day of celebration, he had prepared a most precious gift. "This is the treasure of Amunra, blessed through countless sacred rites. It will bring divine favor and grant your heart's desires." Then, summoning Egypt's greatest architect, he commanded him to pose a riddle for the court. Whoever gave the most ingenious answer would claim the golden lion statue. "Tell me, how can one measure the height of the soon-to-be-completed temple both swiftly and with precision?" A minister confidently stepped forward. "Simply climb to the temple's highest point, count the number of stone blocks and multiply by each block's height." Though workable, the method was far too cumbersome and inefficient. One by one, the ministers proposed their answers. Yet though the methods varied, none were truly simple or efficient. Not a single man produced the right solution. Bifetu's brows furrowed. "Has no one among you, blessed by Ra himself, the wisdom to solve this riddle?" Then Ivy raised her hands, her voice ringing clear. "If one merely wishes to know the temple's height, all that is needed is a single rod. At noon, plant the rod upright in the ground. Measure the length of its shadow and then the length of the temple's shadow. The ratio of the two shadows reveals the temple's true height." Her elegant, straightforward method left even Egypt's greatest architect dumbstruck. Rising at once, he implored Ivy to join his academy of builders. But from the throne, Bifetu's voice cut through the hall. "No, Ivy is a rare treasure. She belongs by my side and nowhere else." Then he lifted the weighty golden lion statue in his own hands, his gaze fixed unwaveringly upon Ivy. With steady, deliberate steps, he strode straight toward her. Yes, he would bestow this supreme honor upon her himself. Step by step he closed the distance, his presence radiating an irresistible majesty. The nearness made Ivy's heart pound wildly. Her cheeks burned crimson as though she could scarcely breathe. Before Ivy could even react, Bifetu clasped her delicate hand and gently placed the golden lion statue into her palm. As her eyes fell upon it, she froze. The base bore the exact same lotus emblem as the one carved into the clay tablet. That could only mean one thing. Someone here within this very hall was plotting against the pharaoh. And whoever it was, they had to hold great power. Perhaps even the former owner of this statue. Just as Ivy sank deeper into thought, Princess Amunra approached gracefully, her smile faint. "That lotus emblem," she said softly, "belongs to me." She added almost casually, "Nidru bears the same mark as well. Every consort of Bifetu is given this emblem." At that moment, Bifetu's cold voice cut through their conversation, freezing the air in the great hall. Seeing her royal brother approach, Amunra's face lit up with unrestrained joy, and she threw herself into his arms. Watching the princess's radiant smile, Ivy's eyes clouded with sorrow and loneliness. A sudden dizziness swept over her. The voices around her blurred as though the world itself had slipped away. Just as she was about to collapse, Bifetu strode forward and caught her firmly in his arms. From his lips burst the name he had carried in his heart for 5 long years, Nefertary. 5 years of yearning and obsession could never be deceived. Though her appearance had changed, he recognized her in an instant. Before the gathered court, he spoke that forbidden name aloud, and the hall fell into stunned silence. For in all these years, no one had dared utter it again. Amunra, unable to accept the truth, stepped forward and demanded Bifatu to answer. Who exactly was Nefertary? Ivy dared not meet his gaze, utterly confused as to why her identity had suddenly been exposed. Bifatu stared at the beauty before him, the corners of his lips curling into an uncontrollable smile. What's this? Even you feel embarrassed? Before Ivy could reply, he swept her into his arms like a triumphant king rising from the waters. Seeing his brother so indifferent, Amunra was left completely baffled. Even the ministers looked bewildered. Why was His Highness holding a boy and calling him Nefertary? The murmurs from the crowd made Ivy burn with shame. She tried to break free from his embrace, but Bifatu whispered coldly in her ear, "Don't move." Carrying her into the center of the hall, he suddenly halted, grinning like a child who had just received candy. "As you all can see," he declared, "for years I have searched for a foreign princess, and today she has finally returned to me." With that, he yanked the wig from Ivy's head. Golden hair and azure eyes shimmered in the open, undeniable before all. This was Nefertary. Bifatu declared on the spot, "From this day forward, anyone bearing the name Nefertary may once again live freely in our nation. And as for every witness present today, you shall each receive 10 taels of gold." Yet at that very moment, Ivy once again felt that same chilling presence from before. The cold gaze hidden within the crowd made her tremble uncontrollably, though she could not find where it came from. Noticing the strange tension, Bifatu said nothing more, that he simply held Ivy tightly and strode out of the banquet. Only after returning to his chambers did he gently set her down. "Do you know how I lived these 5 years? I kept guessing why you left without a word. Guessing for 5 long years. I know how to command armies, I know how to govern a nation, and I can build monuments of stone and steel. But the one thing I cannot understand is you. If I was too harsh and drove you away, then I will never force you again. If I was reckless and failed to be gentle, then I will learn tenderness. Perhaps I should never have married Nachin, then I will never favor them. Perhaps I should never have given you that serpent-shaped bracelet, then I will destroy every single golden one across the land. So this time, will you not leave me again?" Bifatu's heartfelt confession left Ivy utterly stunned. What shocked Ivy most was that this lofty king would bow his head to her. This pharaoh, who could decide the fate of a nation and secure Egypt's stability with a mere word, had no reason to kneel before anyone, save the sun itself. A storm of emotions surged within Ivy's heart. She did not know how to respond to the man in her arms, who now appeared so vulnerable. After a long silence, she finally asked softly, when had Bifatu discovered her true identity? To her disbelief, Bifatu had already recognized her back in the village of Malai. Gently cupping her face, he whispered, "You think it's impossible, only because you've never tried. For 5 years every single day I've thought of no one but you. Did you truly believe a wig and black paint could deceive me?" Whatever Ivy desired, Bifatu was willing to give. For her sake, he was even willing to be a foolish king. All he wished was for Ivy to remain by his side, not to vanish once again as she had 5 years ago. Yet what he did not know was that Ivy's return to ancient Egypt carried a purpose, to change the course of his fate. But one day she would have to return to her own time. And when that moment came, what would become of them? By noon the next day, the sun blazed warmly overhead, yet a red-haired boy was running for his life, because he simply didn't know how to face Ivy now. But with the pharaoh's safety at stake, Ivy had no choice but to press him for answers. Watching the awkward expression on Buka's face, she exposed his thoughts in a single sentence. Just moments ago they were close friends, and the next she was suddenly Nefertary. Buka quickly denied it. That's not true. Yet deep inside this inexperienced boy's heart, he had long harbored feelings for the pharaoh's cherished queen. Feelings he could never confess. And just then Ivy suddenly clapped a hand over his mouth. For not far away, a mysterious figure in black had caught her eye. Beneath the cloak was none other than the pharaoh's most trusted priest, Lihita. To avoid being discovered, Ivy swiftly pulled Buka into hiding. What puzzled her most was why Egypt's highest priest had come here without a single attendant, and why he would suddenly appear in the cold palace. And the only resident of that palace was the Hittite princess, Nijiru. The thought of Nijiru's identity made Ivy recall the contents of the clay tablet. After all, whether it was Amunra or Nijiru, both could have been the one who carved the lotus text. But as a Hittite princess, Nijiru would certainly be capable of writing documents like the clay tablet. If that were true, then Lahita's presence here could only mean the two of them were secretly in league. Yet just as Ivy pieced her suspicions together, Biffitu suddenly appeared, his voice cold as he demanded to know what she was doing there. What left her stunned was that Lahita now stood at Biffitu's side. Though moments ago she had seen him in the cold palace. Biffitu's arrival sent young Buka dropping to his knees in terror. In his heart he panicked. To be seen so close to Ivy by His Highness. Forget joining the royal guard, even keeping his life would be a blessing. Ivy, unwilling to drag Buka down with her, prayed silently that Biffitu would let her go, that he would not pursue. But Biffitu strode forward, seized her wrist and ordered his men to send Buka back to Giza, banished for life, never to leave. Ivy knew all too well that joining the Pharaoh's 5 great legions, becoming a soldier as outstanding as his brother, had always been Buka's dream. Watching Buka dragged away, Ivy felt powerless to stop it. The fate of this nation rested in Biffitu's hands, and only he had the authority to decide. Faced with yet another unfolding tragedy, Ivy sank once more into guilt, for unknowingly she had altered another person's destiny. Biffitu's life, the fate of the true Nefertary, Nijiru's path, and now even innocent Buka had been punished because of her. Overwhelmed with sorrow, she thought bitterly, if only she had never come here. But Biffitu would not allow such thoughts. Nefertary, he said coldly, remember this, you are my most beloved consort. With that, he seized her wrist and led her away. Ivy's heart churned with confusion. Why had everything turned out this way, and what would become of Buka? Worse still, the truth about Lahita remained a mystery. His calm, unreadable expression only deepened Ivy's unease. Biffitu pulled her into a secluded place, intent on devouring the beauty before him with a frenzied kiss. Yet Ivy shoved him away forcefully. Where I come from, only lovers can do such things. Seeing her face flushed red, Biffitu curved his lips into a teasing smile. But we are far more than just lovers. Biffitu carried the panicked Ivy straight to the newly built altar. Pointing to the distant temple of Sinkhub, he said softly, at the center stands me, the greatest sun god of Egypt, and on either side are you and I. Though our wedding has not yet taken place, from 5 years ago I already regarded you as my queen. With Ra as witness, this is the proof of my love for you. You can only be mine. In the soon-to-be completed temple, our statues will be carved together, and they shall endure for eternity. Ivy knew in her heart that every word he spoke was true. Even in the modern age, the statues of the Pharaoh and Nefertary still stood vividly upon Egyptian soil. Yet the place meant for the true Nefertary had now been stolen, by her, an outsider. The thought alone drove Ivy to the edge of collapse. She shoved Biffitu away and screamed, "Don't put my statue there." If things continued along this path, she could not imagine what history itself would become. But Biffitu would not relent. He demanded that Ivy pledge herself before the great sun god, to be his consort for all eternity. Yet Ivy could not, she knew too well. Her very existence would only destroy his future. So she refused, firmly and without hesitation. Shattered, she fell to her knees, choking out the words, I can't do this." And as Biffitu gazed upon her merciless refusal, it felt as though Ivy had never once held a shred of love for him. Biffitu felt he must have gone mad, to allow her to treat him like nothing more than the silt at the bottom of the Nile. Ever since Ivy had enraged him that day, Buka had been banished back to Giza. Yet the Pharaoh's word was as unshakable as gold. Ivy was still permitted to reside in the palace, and Biffitu still brought her to important councils. But he never again set foot in her chambers, nor did he ask after her. Until one day the arrival of a maidservant made time, frozen in silence, begin to flow once more. Seeing the girl hesitate, Ivy smiled gently. "Whatever it is you wish to ask, just say it." The maid fell to her knees in fear. "This servant dares not." Ivy reassured softly, "You don't have to be so formal with me, speak your mind." Her kindness gave the maid the courage to voice her doubt. "Lady Nefertary, why do you always anger His Majesty? 5 years ago I was still a child, but my elder sister once told me, you were the Pharaoh's most beloved consort. Since your disappearance, His Majesty has refused countless marriage proposals, even defying the late Pharaoh's command. And now, you have appeared before him once more. Everyone can see the joy in his eyes, so why do you keep making him angry? Is it because you don't believe in his love for you? My elder sister is also named Nefertary. The late pharaoh once intended to give her, along with 14 other noble daughters, to his majesty, but he rejected them all. Ivy's heart trembled at the words. She had finally found the true Nefertary. Though Bifatu had taken hundreds of wives in his lifetime, Nefertary was the one personally chosen by the late pharaoh. She was the one meant to stand beside him, her likeness carved before the sun god's temple, their love immortalized by time itself. She was the one who truly belonged to Bifatu. Ivy knew then that she had to meet the real Nefertary face to face. For the web of schemes against Bifatu, the hidden ties between Lihita and Nijiru, and the truth of this rightful consort, all might be the first step to unraveling the mystery. So she disguised herself, slipped out of the palace with the maid at her side. The maid told her that Nefertary was famed throughout Thebes for her beauty, now serving as a priestess in the temple. With her kind heart, she was beloved by all. It was only after being rejected by Bifatu that she chose the path of priesthood as a noble's daughter. She had been trained in every art since childhood. All her efforts were meant for the day she might become queen. But when all her hopes were coldly denied by Bifatu, she had no choice but to devote herself to the temple. The thought that all the suffering others endured stemmed from her own arrival deepened Ivy's guilt and self-blame. Lost in her thoughts, she walked on without noticing, until she suddenly collided with a figure ahead. As she stumbled, the servant's daily water jar slipped from her grasp. Panicked, Ivy reached out desperately to catch it. But instead she was pulled firmly into someone's arms. And when she lifted her gaze to that familiar face, in this foreign land of ancient Egypt, Ivy broke down, sobbing as she threw herself against him, crying out the name of her brother Sien. She never imagined her dear brother would appear here. She wept, pouring out her grievances, but the man only said calmly, "In a marketplace like this, you and I pulling at each other, it doesn't look proper." Only then did Ivy realize, he merely resembled her brother. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she shoved him away, snatching the water jar from his hands. Yet the man seemed intrigued by her, smiling as he asked for her name. Just then, the maid's urgent call rang out. Ivy decided she would not reveal her identity. But the man caught her chin with one hand, murmuring, "We will meet again. Next time I hope you won't be wearing a wig." Once he was gone, the maid rushed over in panic, asking if she was hurt. "You vanished in the blink of an eye. You scared me to death." Ivy froze. Meeting someone in this era who resembled her brother Sien so closely, was it a blessing or a cruel irony? When she reached the slums, she found Nefertary praying to Ra on behalf of the people. As her sister introduced a guest, Nefertary's eyes fell upon Ivy's striking blue pupils, and she recognized her at once. She moved to bow to the pharaoh's consort, but Ivy quickly stopped her. Ivy then pleaded earnestly for her to return to the palace with her, for she was the one who should have been the pharaoh's true queen. Yet Nefertary looked utterly confused. Ivy revealed the truth. She was from a world 3,000 years in the future, a woman who did not belong to this age, nor to Egypt. "I never thought my presence here would change your fate. It was you who should have been cherished by the pharaoh. You must return to the palace in Thebes and claim your rightful place. That is the true course of history." But Nefertary could not fully understand her words, and in truth she had no desire to enter the palace. Perhaps if she had been chosen by the pharaoh back then, her life would indeed have been entirely different. But Nefertary still preferred her current life, devoting herself to the temple, giving her entire existence to faith and service. As for you, no matter where you come from, you have already met the pharaoh. All of Egypt knows the depth of his feelings for you. As you said, history has already moved forward because of you. Perhaps this path is the better outcome for both you and His Highness. Yet every time Ivy thought of how her presence would one day bring about Bifitu's death, her heart ached unbearably. Seeing her torment, Nefertary spoke gently, "Perhaps none of this is truly your fault. If you can face your own heart with honesty, the gods will surely show you the way. The pharaoh's burning love for you, why not consider staying? Why not lead his fate toward something better?" Ivy had never dared to answer Bifitu's feelings, precisely because she believed she did not belong to this era. She had never once thought of staying forever, and this was the first time someone urged her to follow her own heart. When you are true to your own thoughts, one day when you open your eyes, the answer will be right before you. Meanwhile, the servants of the palace brought Bifitu the gift he had carefully prepared for Ivy. He thought only of how such a delicate piece of jewelry would shine against her fair skin, how beautiful she would look wearing it. But the memory of her constant refusals ignited his anger once more. With a careless throw, the priceless ornament clattered to the floor, landing squarely in the hands of Lihita, who had just come to seek audience. Gazing at the exquisite anklet, Lihita needed no explanation. It was clearly meant for Ivy. His sudden arrival left Bifetu visibly uneasy. Though I have granted you the privilege of seeing me without prior notice at such a late hour, you should have requested an audience first. It was the first time Bifetu had ever made such a demand of him. Realizing his presence had caused embarrassment, Lihita bowed and promised to be more careful in the future. I come with urgent military news, he reported. General Mentis has sent word. Giza has been reclaimed. The Western Prince did not wait for the Libyan reinforcements. Before Giza fell, he took his own life. Though it was his own royal brother, Bifetu felt not the slightest ripple of emotion. He ordered all of his brother's wives and sons executed, and the daughters married off to cripples in the border villages of Giza. Then Lihita presented a sealed letter. This is from General Mentis, Your Majesty. I did not open it. Taking the letter, Bifetu said flatly, if a message from Mentis has passed through your hands, then naturally you have the right to read it. Do not be overly restrained in the future. But Lihita bowed deeply. It would be more proper for your majesty to review it yourself and decide whether to inform me. Elsewhere, under the veil of night, Ivy slipped quietly back into the harem. Only after she closed the door gently did the maidservant finally exhale in relief. Thank the gods it went smoothly. Had his majesty discovered I helped you sneak out of the palace, I would have suffered dearly. Setting down the water jar, Ivy asked casually, have you always been in the harem? The maid shook her head. I only arrived recently. Before this, I only did cleaning work. His Majesty's consorts are few and Princess Amunra was raised in the palace since childhood. She needs no attendance. As for Nijiru, she resides in the side palace. Months can pass without seeing her once. So with so few people, the work of the ladies-in-waiting is rather easy. In fact, you are the very first mistress I have served. At the mention of Nijiru, Ivy's thoughts immediately turned to Lihita. A high priest entering the harem so freely. No matter how one looked at it, it was suspicious. There had to be some hidden secret between him and Nijiru. A sudden, daring thought flashed through Ivy's mind. She quickly asked the maid, is Lihita truly Egyptian? The maid replied, if he were not, how could he possibly have become the kingdom's first prophet? But then she recalled a rumor, that he was the son of Prince Necho, the late Pharaoh's younger brother, and a Hittite slave woman. In other words, he was of both Hittite and Egyptian blood. It was said that Prince Necho had forced the woman, and after giving birth to Lihita, she took her own life. And what became of Prince Necho? Ivy pressed. The maid explained he had been poisoned 6 years ago. Hearing this, Ivy's bold suspicion only grew stronger. If the rumor was true, then Lihita himself was a ticking time bomb. The man who destroyed his mother was already dead, and perhaps Lihita had a hand in it. Would he not also hate those indirectly responsible? Perhaps even the pharaoh himself. Did Bifetu ever consider this? And if the clay tablet's words were true, that there would be a second plan, then the first rebellion must have involved the Hittites. Lost in thought, Ivy was suddenly yanked forward by a dark figure. Before she realized it, she had been pulled into Bifetu's arms. He coldly ordered the maid to leave. Then he ripped away her wig. You went to the trouble of wearing this. Where have you been? What business is it of yours where I go? Ivy blurted out instinctively. Even she didn't understand why, but every time she saw Bifetu, she couldn't help but defy him. Bifetu's eyes dimmed as he slowly released her. You're right. Wherever you go, when have I ever been able to stop you? Ivy wanted to explain, but as she turned her head, her face came perilously close to Bifetu's handsome features. Flustered, her cheeks flushed red and she instinctively stepped back. No matter what I do, you must believe me, I am on your side. She then told him, there is a Hittite spy close to you. Have you already received word from Giza? The Hittites were involved in this rebellion. And I fear there is an even greater scheme aimed at your life. The culprit could be one of those closest to you. But Bifetu seemed unsurprised. If it is someone closest to me, then that person must also have the power to shake Egypt itself. Without conclusive evidence, acting rashly will only alert them. Ivy wanted to say more, but Bifetu cut her off. He would not allow her to interfere. To him, Ivy's safety was the greatest help she could give. That very day, Hittite envoys arrived in Egypt's capital, bearing rich tributes to present before Bifatu. Yet Ivy found it strange. The man at their head had a face covered in stubble and a scar running across his cheek that he looked less like a diplomat and more like a hardened warrior. To her shock, the man who so resembled her brother Sien from the streets also stood among them. Why had they come to seek audience with Bifatu? From the look in his eyes, it seemed he had recognized her as well. Just then, with a commanding shout, Bifatu entered the hall with Nijiru and his attendants. But this time, Bifatu did not allow Lihita to stand at his side. Instead, he placed him far away from the throne. For so long, Lihita had always stood closest to Bifatu. Such an arrangement could only mean one thing. Bifatu now suspected him. At such a tense moment, and with his peculiar background, Lihita could understand the pharaoh's caution. Then the envoy spoke. "We have come to Thebes to visit Princess Nijiru, and to present some humble gifts to your great kingdom." Opening the ornate box in his hands, he continued, "This is a drawing crafted by Hittite master artisans, depicting our most magnificent temple that we hope it will please your highness." Bifatu nodded with satisfaction. "You even know of my passion for architecture." One of his attendants moved to take the scroll, but the envoy quickly stopped him. "I myself am deeply devoted to the study of architecture that I wish to unfold it for you personally. And as you see, I carry no weapon. Your Majesty need not be concerned." Yet to Ivy, the entire scene felt eerily like the old tale of a map concealing a dagger. After the envoy was thoroughly searched and found unarmed, Bifatu finally allowed him to step forward. The envoy unfurled the scroll, carefully explaining the architectural details to Bifatu. Ivy hid behind Bifatu, her hand clutching the pistol at her back. The moment the envoy made a move, she would fire. She thought to herself, surely he wouldn't be foolish enough to hide a dagger in the scroll. Yet as the parchment unfurled, a blade gleamed from within. In a heartbeat, the envoy snatched the dagger and lunged straight at Bifatu. But Bifatu, no ordinary man in such a position, shifted effortlessly, evading the strike with ease. Ivy tried to rush forward to help, but Bifatu barked at her to stay back. That brief hesitation gave the assassin another chance. Just as death loomed over Bifatu, Lihita hurled himself forward, taking the fatal blow. The dagger sank into his back, and in the same instant, Bifatu drew his sword and cleaved off the assassin's hand. "Guards, drag him away, execute him." When he turned back, he saw black blood spilling from Lihita's wound. In that instant, he realized the blade had been coated with poison. Nijiru rushed forward in alarm. But Lihita reached out a trembling hand toward his pharaoh. "To have met you was the beginning of my life. Even if one day I am hated by all, misunderstood by all, even if you yourself lose faith in me, I will still protect you. So, my princess, I cannot take you away." When Lihita was very young, he was not yet called Lihita. The people around him called him Bai. From the time he could remember, he had never once seen his parents. The only one at his side was a kind old grandmother. The name Bai was the sole gift his father had ever left him. His grandmother was a devout believer, and under her guidance, Lihita was introduced to theology from an early age. He visited many temples and pored over countless sacred texts. In those days, to serve as a priest was an honor beyond measure. Lihita's earliest dream was simply to take holy orders. Often he would wonder, if he could become a great priest, would his father finally come to see him? Yet whenever he asked about his father, his grandmother would evade the question, refusing to speak. Still, Lihita never despaired. He clung to the belief that if he strove hard enough, one day his father would appear. At the age of 14, Lihita passed the trials and became a junior priest at a temple in Thebes, the youngest official priest in all of Egypt. But instead of honor, he was met with cruelty. How could a mongrel of the enemy nation be fit to serve as an Egyptian priest? They jeered. He cried out in defense, insisting he was Egyptian. Yet the mocking laughter around him broke the heart of the boy who was only 14. In a frenzy, he fought back with his fists, lashing out wildly until exhaustion dragged him down. Returning home, Lihita collapsed into his grandmother's arms, sobbing and begging, "Please tell me, I am Egyptian, aren't I? My father was just an ordinary Theban. My mother, a peasant woman from a border village. Right?" Seeing the boy on the verge of breaking, the grandmother could no longer hold back. She could not bear to watch his crystal tears any longer, and at last she chose to break the oath she had sworn to the gods. Falling to her knees before him, she revealed the truth. Your true identity is the son of Prince Necho, the Pharaoh's younger brother. Your mother was a Hittite slave woman taken by Prince Necho from the borderlands. After giving birth to you, she chose to end her life. Only then did Lehita understand why his father had never come for him, because his father considered his very existence a disgrace. No matter how hard he tried, his father would never take pride in him. Even the mother he had never met chose death over staying with him. Broken, Lehita fell to his knees on the banks of the Nile, praying to the gods for the truth. Was all of this truly real? And in that moment, a man leading a stallion appeared behind him. I have heard you are the youngest priest in all of Egypt. Will you come with me? I can give you the answers you seek, but if you do not know what to live for, then live for me. These were the first words Bifetu spoke to Lehita after he had lost his faith. And because of those words, a spark of hope for life ignited within him once more. But when Lehita returned home and pushed open the door, he found his grandmother lying lifeless in a pool of blood. She broke the vow she had sworn to the gods, so she had to die. Had His Highness remained ignorant, she might have continued to live. Now that the path has strayed from its original course, a price must be paid. Yet Lehita no longer cared for his own life. The only person in the world who had ever loved him was gone. There was nothing left for him to believe in. Just as the assassin prepared to finish him off, a short blade pierced through the killer's chest. Before he could even react, he was dead. Bifetu had not expected his own uncle to be so cruel. Fortunately, he had arrived in time. Looking at the dazed, hollow-eyed Lehita, he asked with concern, "Are you all right?" But Lehita's mind was already clouded. The gods were no longer his faith. He turned to leave without another word. Having learned the truth, Lehita's life had lost all meaning. I can no longer help you with anything. But as Lehita turned to leave, Bifetu caught his arm. If the gods are no longer your faith, then make me your faith. For my sake, you will rise as the first prophet of all Egypt. And I will show you a world greater, wider than any truth you've known. Remember my name, I am Ramesses. This name will echo 1,000 years from now as Egypt's greatest pharaoh, carved into temples of glory, worshipped for eternity. And you, as my most trusted minister, will stand beside my name from this day on. You are no longer Bai. You are Lehita. Gazing into Bifetu's radiant eyes, Lehita did not know whether following him would reveal the world he longed to see, but he was willing to try. Over the next 2 years, Bifetu was named elder son of the king, the regent prince of Egypt. Lehita became the second prophet of the Theban temple. His unprecedented youth and wisdom turned him into a living legend throughout the land. 2 years later, a royal prince was poisoned during a meal. The killer was never found. In that same year, Lehita was elevated to Egypt's first prophet, ranked among the kingdom's highest ministers. Half a year later, on a mission, Lehita encountered Enigeru. In that instant, his young heart was deeply moved. Though neither knew the other's true name or station, they vowed to meet again in a year's time, and from then on to be together forever. A few months later, a foreign woman calling herself Nefertary stepped into Bifetu's life. This extraordinary girl changed him, driving the young prince to the edge of losing control of his emotions. Lehita had once thought that perhaps it would be better if she vanished. But when she truly disappeared, she took with her the blazing, sun-like passion that Bifetu once had. 5 years passed, filled with countless upheavals. Bifetu finally ascended the throne as pharaoh, and Lehita remained steadfastly at his side. He vowed to follow him always, seeking truth, or perhaps a world even more beautiful than truth itself. Bifetu was his only faith, his only salvation in this life. Seeing Lehita on the brink of death, Bifetu urgently called for the royal physicians. The ministers below the throne descended into chaos. Nidru clutched Lehita's hand tightly, weeping like falling blossoms in the rain. "Lehita, you must not leave me." At that moment, Lehita's trembling voice called out Bifetu's name. Even on the brink of death, he begged forgiveness for daring to intrude upon the throne without leave. Bifetu's heart felt as if it were rotting away. What he could not understand was why Lehita could still smile at such a time. He could not comprehend, knowing he was suspected, why had Lehita never defended himself? Why bore no hatred? Why even now did he place the blame upon himself? "I told you before, you need not be so formal with me. Yet Lehita whispered again and again, "I'm sorry. Forgive me that I can no longer remain by your side. To follow you is already to glimpse a world beyond truth itself. So Majesty, please, fulfill your dream." Watching Lehita's life ebb away, Bifita broke down completely. "There is still so much I need you to do. I will not allow you to cease serving me. Physicians, where are the physicians?" But in that instant Lehita's eyes closed forever. Bifita roared, "Lehita, wake up. That is an order." The belated physicians finally arrived, trembling as they declared, "My lord, Lehita is gone." In fury, Bifita seized one by the collar. "If you cannot save him, I will bury your entire family with him." It was only Nijiru, still holding her grief and reason, who cried out, "He is already gone. He was loyal to you all his life. At this moment, will you still not let him rest?" But the maddened Pharaoh could no longer hear her words. "Who permitted you to speak? Without my command, Lehita will not leave me." From the moment Bifita met Lehita 10 years ago, he had wanted to bring the brilliant youth under his banner. For a decade, Lehita had remained steadfastly loyal. Bifita had grown accustomed to consulting him in the study, sharing his ambitions and schemes. He had grown used to riding with him along the Nile, surveying the vast lands of his dominion. Lehita would never defy his command, for Bifita's dreams were also Lehita's dreams. Cradling Lehita's body gently, Bifita was overwhelmed with grief. In his heart, this man was no longer just a minister. He was his most trusted friend. Why had he ever doubted him? This pitiful man, who would sacrifice even his life for him, had never once spoken in his own defense. "Damn the Hittites, all of them!" Bifita roared. "Guards, seize the Hittite envoy." Only then did the court realize one of the Hittite envoys was missing. The hall was searched, but his shadow was nowhere to be found. Until they saw him, holding a blade to Ivy's throat. The sight of his beloved in enemy hands made Bifita's heart twist in anguish. Though surrounded on all sides, the man showed no fear, for he knew well that the woman in his grasp was Bifita's very world. His demand was simple: "Give me a horse and I will ride out of the city." If looks alone could kill, he would have perished 1,000 times over beneath Bifita's gaze. Though burning with fury, Bifita had no choice that he could not allow Ivy to suffer even the slightest harm before his eyes. Ivy herself was overwhelmed with guilt. If not for her recklessness and carelessness, she would never have fallen into such a desperate plight. Just as Bifita was about to let the envoy go, Ivy unclasped the pendant at her neck, her concealed defense spray. Seizing the moment, she struck, spraying it into his face. The Hittite envoy collapsed unconscious on the spot. This time Ivy was determined not to burden anyone further. The soldiers rushed forward, ready to kill him instantly, but Ivy threw out her arm to stop them. "Do not kill him. We need him alive, to expose the true traitor." Yet after Lehita had taken the fatal blow for Bifita, rumors of his secret affair with Nijiru had spread like wildfire among the people. Ivy was consumed with guilt once more. To think that Lehita, so vital to Bifita, was truly gone, vanishing forever before his eyes, made her heart ache unbearably. Watching Bifita's solitary back, Ivy felt as though she could no longer breathe from the pain. On reflection, she realized that Lehita's occasional hostility toward her might have been because of Nijiru. If not for her, Nijiru would never have been cast into the cold palace. Though Lehita loved Nijiru deeply, he placed loyalty to his pharaoh above all else. No matter how Nijiru longed for Lehita to take her away, the devoted prophet had never once considered stealing away his king's consort, even if that princess was deemed worthless in the king's eyes. With this thought, Ivy rose, determined to pay a visit to the pitiable princess. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly remembered another figure entangled in the affair, the Hittite envoy who had been thrown into prison. With her maid in tow, Ivy made her way to the palace's secret dungeon. After offering the guards a handful of gold and jewels, she successfully gained entry. This dungeon of Thebes was reserved for the most dangerous royal criminals. The place reeked of gloom and legend. Countless prisoners through the ages had perished here, whether by forced suicide or execution. After searching through the cells, Ivy finally found the Hittite envoy. Seeing him unconscious, she called his name loudly. Slowly, the man stirred and opened his eyes. When his gaze settled on Ivy's true face, he could not help but marvel. "So this is the true visage of the famed Nefertary?" Ivy had come here for one purpose, to question him. For from what she had seen that day, Nijiru recognized only him, not the burly man who struck at Bifitu. And when that assassin acted, this envoy's tone toward him was that of command, not persuasion. Ivy asked directly who he truly was. The man gave a faint smile and replied, "My name is Yari." What amused Yari was that Ivy seemed not to know who he was. In all of Egypt, there were still people ignorant of his name. You acted so bold and decisive in the throne room, and yet, perhaps you are nothing more than a foolish little girl? But Ivy paid no heed to his taunts or identity. She stated her intent plainly. She wanted to strike a deal. In your condition, you won't survive here for more than a few days, but I can give you something to increase your chances of escape. In return, you will tell me who the traitor inside Pharaoh's palace is. Yari found little fault with the offer but arched a brow in curiosity. Helping me escape would make you a traitor yourself. Do you not care? Ivy replied coolly, "My affairs are none of your concern." From her robes she drew out a badge. It's forged from stainless steel, far harder than your iron blades. With this, any lock, any gate can be cut open. Yari accepted the badge, then revealed the name of the traitor, Amunra. When the name Princess Amunra left his lips, Ivy's heart jolted in utter shock. Yari explained, "Amunra only passed US reports of the Pharaoh's movements. But this so-called second plan you speak of, surely you think it was meant to assassinate him?" He scoffed at Ivy's suspicion. Assassinate Pharaoh? That little princess would never be entrusted with such a task. Besides, anyone can see her love for Bifitu. And at this point, killing Pharaoh is meaningless. Egypt's strength cannot be undone by a single blade in the dark. The true purpose of our visit was simply this. Our king wished to see Princess Nijiru and to bring her back to Hutti. But the foolish girl insisted on staying by the side of the man she loves. Even after such humiliation, she chose Egypt. Living like this, she might as well be dead. So yes, part of our mission was to deliver poison to her. Now the deal is done. Hand me what you promised. Having learned the truth, Ivy tossed him the badge. Freed from his bonds, Yari looked at her and invited, "Come with me, return to Hutti." But Ivy knew the only reason she had helped him was because he bore such a striking resemblance to her brother Sien, and nothing more. After all, he stood on the opposite side of Egypt, while she stood firmly on Pharaoh's side. Watching her walk away, Yari felt a strange emptiness in his heart. So, it was only because I looked like her brother? Meanwhile, in the palace of Thebes, attendants carried stacks of public decrees prepared over the past days. Though Bifitu still handled matters of state, he had locked himself inside his chambers, and for 5 whole days he had not taken a single bite of food. When Ivy learned of this, her heart twisted with fear. What was Bifitu thinking? Had he given up on life? Under the scorching sun, Ivy rushed toward the pharaoh's chambers. As she ran, memories returned of the first time she met Lihita, the priest who never left Pharaoh's side, loyal to the very end. Clad in his white robes, he had seemed like the only soul untainted by the dust of the mortal world. But now he had vanished so easily before Bifitu's eyes. Behind him, there would never again be that white-robed figure. When Ivy arrived, she saw ministers standing at the chamber doors, carrying platters of food. In vain. General Mentis hurried forward to salute her, while another official pleaded with a tray in hand, "Lady Nefertary, please persuade His Majesty that he has not eaten in 5 days." But Ivy, her eyes blazing, suddenly swept the tray from his hands, sending the food crashing to the floor. She lashed out at the ministers who called themselves loyal. An ordinary man would die after 3 days without food or water, and yet you let him remain inside for 5 whole days. What are you waiting for? Call the soldiers, break down this door. Ivy pounded her fists against the gates, shouting Bifitu's name with all her strength. Just as the crowd prepared to force the doors, they creaked open from within. Bifitu stood there, his voice heavy. "So it was you? I thought it might be someone else." To the court, she was Pharaoh's most beloved consort, but also the traitor. She had bewitched him, conspired with the Hittites, caused Lihita's death, and even let the envoy escape. The evidence was undeniable. Yet what no one knew was that Ivy had only aided Yari's escape to uncover the palace's true traitor. And that traitor was none other than the girl who claimed to speak with the gods, Bifitu's own sister, Princess Amunra. Ivy jolted awake from her nightmare, realizing then how much of a fool she truly was. believing that, as one from the future, she could single-handedly turn the tide of fate. Now caught in the torrent of history, she still deluded herself into thinking she could remain a detached observer. She had once believed that, like before, putting on the bracelet would return her to the future. But now things were no longer the same. For deep within her heart, Bifetu had already left an indelible mark. Why had she never dared to confess it? If suppressing this love would only bring disaster, then she should tell him, even if it led to nothing in the end. Even if it meant enduring a pain that tore her soul apart, she was willing to bear it. Shielding her eyes from the blinding sun, Ivy looked ahead. Egyptian soldiers stood in tight formation, and their king stood before them, delivering a fervent speech. Since the day Lahida died, the wheel of fate had been set into unstoppable motion. Perhaps there had once been a chance to change it, but Yari's escape had sealed their path. Today I grant you the color of blood for your banners. I name you the Set Legion. You shall be Egypt's mightiest force, an emblem of absolute authority. In history, the Set Legion would become one of Pharaoh's famed 4 great legions, known for their crimson banners and their unparalleled ferocity in battle. You all know, my loyal subject, my dearest friend, my great priest Lahida, he fell to the hands of the Hittites. And now the Hittites have once more allied with Syria, violating our borders through the Sinai. This time I will strike back, through your strength, with a blow they will never forget. Bifetu's impassioned words sent fire through the ranks, his soldiers roaring with unshakable resolve to fight for their king and their land. Ivy gazed at the scene before her. Egypt and Hutti, 2 eternal rivals, had clashed for ages, their struggle never ceasing. In recorded history, it was Bifetu who finally ended the strife between the 2 nations. But that moment was not meant to be now. Now war had come 4 years too soon. How could she possibly ensure his safety through this calamity? This campaign, Bifetu declared, will once again be blessed by the first prophet who wields divine power. Ivy froze in confusion. The first prophet? But hadn't Lahida already died? At that moment her maid rushed over. My lady, you've only just awakened, your body is still weak. Ivy insisted she was fine, but a wave of dizziness struck her. How? I only slept for 1 night. The maid confessed in a trembling voice. You slept for 3 whole days. It was His Majesty's command that he ordered me to slip a sleeping draught into your food that I dared not disobey. Realization hit Ivy. Of course that he still suspected her. With his suspicious nature, once he had interrogated the jailers himself, he must have known. But if he truly believed she was the traitor, why make her sleep for 3 days? What purpose could it serve? Ivy's thoughts spun in turmoil, her mind too clouded to untangle the truth. Just then a figure appeared at Bifetu's side. One Ivy recognized instantly. She raised her voice in prayer to the gods, begging them to bless the soldiers and lead Egypt to glorious victory. It was the true Nefertary, the woman who, even millennia later, would be remembered for an immortal love that defied time itself. Though 6 years late, fate had brought them together again, this time under far different circumstances. At the same moment, a boy with no combat experience, a mere new recruit, was appointed by Pharaoh as the first commander of the Set Legion. For in this war between Egypt and Hutti, the opening battle did not require victory. Rather, the plan was to send fresh troops forward, luring the enemy deeper. To anyone with eyes, it was obvious. This was a death sentence for the boy. Yet the youth, eager for glory and full of devotion to his country, only felt gratitude toward Pharaoh's favor. To serve Egypt had always been his deepest wish. What Ivy could not understand was this. The boy was none other than Buka, younger brother of Mentus. Why doing this, Bifetu placed himself in a position of utter cruelty and injustice. If events continued unchecked, Buka would die, the war would spiral out of control, and in the end, Bifetu himself would be destroyed. Why has everything slipped out of control? Ivy's heart ached with despair. All she had ever wanted was for him, simply to live. At that moment, Ivy had no clear answer. All she knew was that she had to do whatever it took to steer history back onto its rightful path. Mentus stormed back into his chambers, slamming the door shut, his anger boiling over with nowhere to go. Absurd. Why choose Buka, a boy with no experience? This is nothing but sending him to his death. As his fury raged, a sudden pounding echoed at the door. Just as he wondered who it could be, a disguised figure slipped inside. It was Ivy. She had come with one purpose, to beg Mentis to take her with him on the campaign. But armies did not march with women in their ranks, that if Bifetu discovered her presence, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yet Ivy pleaded with determination, "I have to help Buka. Please believe me, I can be of use to you." Mentis hesitated, his lips tightening. This campaign was long and perilous, the outcome uncertain, that he could not in good conscience promise her safety. But Ivy declared firmly, "If you don't take me with you, this battle will be lost." Recently, rumors had spread through the palace. Whispers that the blue-eyed Nefertary was the traitor, that if she dared to speak this way, surely she must know something. Could it be? Is she the spy herself? Hinting that she already passed word to the Hittites. Mentis's thoughts tangled in suspicion. Ivy's intent was impossible to grasp. As though reading his doubts, Ivy quickly shook her head. "I am not the traitor. The true betrayer is the girl who claims to speak with the goddess, Princess Amunra. The Hittite envoy told me this before his escape. And I had already uncovered traces. The lotus-marked writings and letters, her noble birth, and her knowledge of Egypt's campaign plans in their entirety. All three signs point directly to Princess Amunra. I know you may not fully trust me, but we cannot risk losing this campaign, and neither of us wants to see Buka's death." Ivy was about to press further when a soldier burst in. "General, urgent news. Prince Bifetu has been attacked." Ivy's body gave way and she nearly collapsed, if not for Mentis catching her in time. Only when she heard that Bifetu's life was not in danger did her expression ease slightly. Yet the true shock came when the assassin was named. It was Nigeru. Upon hearing of Bifetu's assassination attempt, Ivy rushed to the palace in a panic to see him. With her wig on, the ministers did not recognize her and mistook her for a mere servant. "A lowly attendant dares stand before Pharaoh. Outrageous," they barked. Ivy then tore off the wig, revealing her true face. "I only came out of concern for His Majesty's safety." The rumor that the blue-eyed Nefertary was a traitor had already spread throughout the palace. Yet she remained Pharaoh's most favored consort so long as Bifetu himself had not spoken. The ministers dared not go too far. Bifetu's gaze upon Ivy was soft and tender, but to her, it was torment. That hadn't he already lost faith in me? Why then does he still look at me this way? Her eyes then shifted to the copper sword that had struck him, the very weapon used in the attack. Copper blades carried natural cytotoxicity. Without proper treatment, such wounds could easily prove fatal. For injuries like Bifetu's, herbs and water alone would never suffice. Summoning her resolve, Ivy pleaded, "Allow me to treat His Majesty myself." But her words were met with scorn. "Egypt's medicine has ever been the finest under heaven. What need have we of you?" sneered a minister. Ivy was just about to defend herself when word came from outside. The high priest had arrived, summoned to heal Bifetu. But watching the priest merely chant prayers without offering any real treatment, Ivy knew this would never suffice. That if Bifetu were to live, she had to act herself. When she declared that the wound must be enlarged and thoroughly cleaned, the court gasped. Many thought she had lost her mind. Just as the ministers were about to brand her a traitor, Bifetu intervened, choosing to trust her. With his consent, Ivy quickly retrieved the medical kit she had prepared in advance, packed with state-of-the-art modern supplies. She sterilized a knife over open flame, then carefully widened the wound. The sight left the ministers utterly dumbfounded. Yet Bifetu gazed at her with unwavering faith. Ivy cleansed the wound with iodine, then dressed it with clean bandages. The final and most crucial step was the injection of antibiotics, vital to kill bacteria and prevent infection. She had packed the antibiotics before her journey, fearing possible injuries. She never imagined they would truly be used. And to use them on a pharaoh 3,000 years in the past, such a surreal experience sent a thrill through her veins. As the injection entered his body, Ivy exhaled in relief. The treatment was complete. Bifetu would survive. After tending carefully to his wound, she prepared to withdraw quietly. But her steps were halted by Nigeru's anguished cry. "If you could heal Bifetu, then why didn't you save Litahi? You could have saved him, couldn't you?" Ivy froze, staring at the princess's eyes filled with despair. She wanted to speak. But how could she explain that Litahi's life had slipped away too quickly, too suddenly for her to grasp even a single thread of hope? Before she could answer, Bifetu's voice rang out with cold authority. "Queen Nigeru, you are guilty of treason." For the sake of the late Pharaoh's decree that named you my bride, and for the fact that you were my first consort, I shall spare you execution, but your right to live as one of the living is stripped away. From tomorrow, all records of Nigeru are to be destroyed, her existence erased from Egypt. She will be exiled to the temple on the western bank of Thebes, to serve the god of death and rebirth for the rest of her days. The once noble princess had long lost her spoiled arrogance. She loved Lidahi with all her heart, yet through a series of cruel twists of fate, they were forever separated by death. Now stripped of her right to live by the pharaoh and condemned to serve the god of death and rebirth for eternity, she was finally free from the mockery and gossip of the living. The ancient Egyptians believed in reincarnation. Perhaps Bifita did all this hoping that one day they might meet again in another life. Watching the fallen princess, Ivy felt a deep sense of guilt. For Nigeru, the only thing she could still remember was that warm afternoon 6 years ago. The nameless young man, gentle as sunlight and flowing water, was forever engraved in her heart. But now that he was gone, what use was hatred anymore? Ivy felt the weight of guilt pressing even heavier on her chest. Mentis tried to comfort her that it wasn't your fault. Lidahi's poison was fatal from the start. But what Ivy blamed herself for went far beyond that. She was like a tiny pebble that had accidentally fallen into the river of history. The ripples she caused were already beyond her control, and every step she took seemed to go wrong. Could letting Yari go also lead to something irreversible? Ivy murmured, unaware that Mentis had heard her. He suddenly asked, voice trembling with urgency, that Hittite prisoner. What was his name? Seeing Mentis's alarmed expression, Ivy was puzzled. His name is Yari. Mentis slapped his forehead in regret. No, that was a mistake. Do you even know who our enemy is this time? The king of the Hittites. In recent years, that king had built countless fortifications in the capital, turning the dry highlands into an impenetrable fortress. Yet only a few years ago he had been a weak and indecisive ruler. His newfound aggression clearly wasn't born of his own will. In the Hittite Empire, the one people truly feared wasn't the so-called king. It was the ruler behind him, Yari. The empire's power came entirely from him. He trained the Hittite strongest soldiers and held the army firmly in his grasp, controlling the king like a puppet. In both cunning and strategy, he was Bifita's most formidable enemy. The true sovereign behind Hutti, Yari possessed wisdom and tactical brilliance equal to Bifitu's, commanding troops strong enough to rival Egypt itself. When Ivy realized the man she had released was such a figure, she instantly knew that Buka was no match for him. Would Buka end up dying at her hands again? This time indirectly? Meanwhile, Buka was marching with his troops, completely unaware of the danger closing in on him. After repelling a small enemy squad, he thought to himself that victory might soon be within reach. Then perhaps he could earn the pharaoh's favor, and finally confess his feelings to Ivy. But as soon as the thought crossed his mind, he felt embarrassed by his own boldness. He ordered 100 men to stay behind and receive the coming Set Legion, while the rest followed him deeper into enemy territory. Along the way, Buka rescued many Egyptian refugees, sharing with them food and water from his dwindling supplies. Yet something felt strange. There wasn't a single Hittite soldier along the route, while his army's provisions were nearly gone. Ahead lay the lands of Syria. Logic told him to retreat and wait for his brother's reinforcements. But if he did that, he would forever remain nothing more than Mentis's younger brother. He refused to live in someone else's shadow. He wanted to earn glory with his own hands and win the pharaoh's recognition. Only then would he have the right to stand proudly before Ivy. The army's supplies could barely last another day, but once they crossed into Syrian territory, there would be no need for mercy. They could plunder freely. In the end, Buka's hunger for glory triumphed over reason. He ordered his men to march onward into Syria. But the very next moment, a sea of Hittite soldiers surrounded them. Seeing an enemy force dozens of times larger than his own, Buka froze in panic. When the opposing army raised a black banner marked with deep purple symbols, his troops completely lost their will to fight. The flag, black as the night sky emblazoned with violet totems, was infamous. Wherever it appeared, it meant the Hittites' first general, the ruler behind the throne, was on the battlefield. Should he fight or break through? How should he form up? What should he do? Buka's mind went blank. Moments later, the overwhelming Hittite troops crushed any chance of escape. Still, he clung to a 1 in 10,000 hope. maybe that mischievous girl would show up on the battlefield. With such a brainless move, there's no way she's here, came a cold voice, and since she's not, whoever you are, you're not leaving this place alive. As rows of archers drew their bows, Buka felt despair wash over him. Was this really where his story would end? Then from the distance a familiar voice shouted, "Buka, you idiot." Both Yari and Buka froze, stunned by what they saw next. A golden figure on horseback rode through the dust, raising a shining banner high above her head. Behind her, crimson flags billowed wildly in the wind. Buka's eyes widened in disbelief. Ivy had come, leading the Set Legion to save him. Beyond his shock, Buka couldn't help but feel confused. The Set Legion's forces included chariots. Even with high mobility, there was no way they could have caught up to his vanguard so quickly. "Don't just stand there. Move," Ivy shouted. "We'll talk about it on the way back." Watching Ivy charge across the battlefield on horseback, Yari's curiosity toward this extraordinary girl only deepened. She was nothing like the frail figure he had first met. This was a warrior, not a damsel. Yari gave the order to hold position. He wasn't interested in clashing with Egypt's Set Legion so soon. But one of his bearded officers disagreed, claiming it was merely a trick to lure them and asking for permission to pursue. Yari barely remembered the man, he simply found his face unpleasant to look at. Chuckling, Yari handed him 1,000 soldiers and warned, "Don't chase too far." At the moment, Yari cared less about ruling the Hittites or defeating Egypt than he did about keeping Ivy close. The problem, of course, was that she happened to be the pharaoh's concubine. Provoking an international scandal now would be inconvenient. Just as Yari was lost in thought, one of his subordinates interrupted, worried that the bearded officer's unit might be wiped out by the Egyptians. Yari waved it off. This skirmish was nothing but a test between both sides. As long as the fool followed orders, he'd be fine. And if not, then consider it a little gift for Ivy and Egypt. On the other side, Buka stopped Ivy, confused. "If the Set Legion is already here, why are we retreating instead of fighting back?" Ivy explained breathlessly that the real Set Legion hadn't arrived yet. She had only borrowed the fastest riders and come ahead, carrying the banner to bluff the enemy. Seeing the bruises across her body, Buka finally realized she wasn't even skilled at riding, yet had risked her life just to save him. Deep down, Buka swore to himself that one day he would repay Ivy for this. Meanwhile, the bearded commander spotted the flag planted in the ground and sneered. Just as he thought, a trick from the Egyptians. He grumbled to himself, furious that the title of first general had gone to Yari. He's not even Hittite. How could he ever be loyal to us? Ignoring Yari's warning, the bearded man ordered his men to continue the pursuit. When he saw the crimson banners ahead again, he assumed it was another decoy, but as he rode closer, the figure that awaited him was like the Reaper himself. By then it was far too late. Screams echoed across the battlefield. Later, Mentis reported to Bifatu that every Hittite soldier who pursued had been annihilated. Yet Bifatu showed no reaction. He simply asked, "Where's Ivy now?" In ancient Egypt, when a warrior turned 18, he would choose a master to whom he swore eternal loyalty, following that master for life regardless of good or evil. Buka had always sworn his loyalty to the pharaoh, but ever since Ivy appeared, that loyalty had begun to waver. He volunteered for this campaign hoping that victory would silence the turmoil in his heart. He wanted Ivy to stop making him question himself. But just then Buka froze. Bifatu had silently appeared behind them. Ivy too was stunned. Why was Bifatu here? Shouldn't he be in Thebes with the real Nefertary? Would the pharaoh really come personally for such a minor border skirmish? When Ivy left Thebes, she had already made up her mind. Since history couldn't be changed, all she could do was save Buka, uncover the truth behind Amunra, and then return to the future. But when she glanced back, she was shocked to see Bifatu's face twisted in anger, a look she had never seen before. Instinctively, Ivy turned to run. She had no idea what she'd done to make him so furious. Bifatu immediately mounted his horse and gave chase. Ever since Ivy returned to ancient Egypt, she'd thought Bifatu might have some kind of emotional paralysis. His face never betrayed joy, sorrow, or rage. But this time she could clearly see fury written all over his expression. In the end, Ivy's legs were no match for a galloping horse. Bifatu caught up and pulled her onto the saddle in one swift motion. Ivy looked at him, bewildered. She hadn't done anything wrong, so why was he so angry? Bifatu's voice trembled with suppressed rage as he barked, "Silence. Then, eyes cold and piercing, he demanded, "What is your relationship with Yari?" Ivy quickly explained that she had met Yari fewer than 3 times and had no idea he was such an important figure. Letting him go was only to exchange information about Egypt's traitor. Bifitu pressed further, asking why she cared so much about a traitor. It wasn't her concern. His tone made Ivy bristle. "I don't care what happens to Egypt," she snapped. "I just don't want to see you get hurt." She warned him to be cautious, even around those closest to him. Then, almost in a whisper, she added, "Besides, I'll be leaving soon anyway." At the word leaving, Bifitu suddenly pulled her into his arms, his anger almost palpable. Yet Ivy refused to back down. "I will leave sooner or later. You were the one who didn't trust me. You even drugged me to make me sleep." Her emotions spilled over. "I never wanted to stay here. We're not from the same world at all. None of this is real." The moment the words left her mouth, Ivy realized she had said too much. Bifitu's lips curled slightly. He lifted her gently, then set her down on the ground again. He had suspected as much, but hadn't expected her to use those exact words. At that instant, Ivy felt the urge to tell him the truth. But who would believe something so absurd? After a long hesitation, she finally spoke. She told him she was from the future. Bifitu didn't question her. He simply stared at her calmly, as if he had known all along. From the moment he saw her again on that small hill in Giza, he had already felt it. 5 years had passed for Bifitu, yet time seemed to have left no trace on Ivy. She looked exactly as she had the day they first met. Ivy poured out her story with desperation, hoping Bifitu would believe that everything she had done was for his sake. But Bifitu wasn't listening. All he could think about was how easily she could slip away. With that golden bracelet, she could go somewhere he could never reach. Perhaps the next time they met would be decades later. Or perhaps she had no intention of returning at all. Bifitu couldn't, and wouldn't, let that happen. Grasping her hand tightly, he asked in a low voice, "How far in the future are you from?" Thinking he wanted to know Egypt's fate, Ivy answered honestly, 3,000 years ahead. But then Bifitu said something that caught her completely off guard. Nefertary was the traitor. Seeing her confusion, he explained, "If you hadn't insisted on taking Nefertary's place that day to tend my wounds, she would have been executed for treason on the spot." "I never doubted you," Bifitu continued. "When rumors spread through the palace that Nefertary was the spy, I had someone impersonate her, to keep the real traitor's name alive." He looked at her intently, a faint reproach in his tone. "It seems you never remembered what I told you." Then, with a voice full of emotion, he confessed, "I am Pharaoh of Egypt now. Whatever you desire, I can give it to you. If it is reasonable, I'll double it. And if it isn't reasonable, I'll become an unreasonable ruler for your sake. Even if what you want is my life, I would give it to you as long as you promise to stay by my side." To hide her embarrassment, Ivy quickly changed the subject and asked what Bifitu had planned to do with Nefertary. Still pressing soft kisses along her neck, Bifitu murmured, "Nefertary conspired with her sister to release the Hittite prisoner. She approached the pharaoh disguised as a priestess to poison him, treason punishable by death. Before I left," he continued calmly, "I had already given the order. In a few days, Nefertary and her sister will be executed in public." His tone softened, but the words grew darker. "If you stay, I'll remove every obstacle for you. But if you still insist on leaving," his gaze hardened, "then I'll make sure Buka and the others never draw breath again." In that instant, Ivy finally understood everything. Naming Nefertary as a priestess, ordering Shepet to drug her, sending Buka to the front lines. All of it had been Bifitu's plan from the very beginning. It wasn't an idle threat. It was a declaration. Trembling, she whispered, "So, you're threatening me?" Bifitu lowered his noble head, his hair brushing against her shoulder. In the gentlest voice, he said the cruelest truth. "Yes, I am. Because what else can I do to make you stay?" For the second time, the Pharaoh of Egypt bowed his proud head to her. The man who ruled with absolute authority before the world now trembled before the woman he cherished, forced to disguise his helplessness as a threat. Something deep within Ivy's heart trembled. She realized that in this vast world, the one she couldn't bear to part from was not Shepet nor Buka, but him. Across the chasm of millennia, she had found a happiness she'd never known before. And only now did Ivy finally understand. She had already fallen deeply, irreversibly in love with Bifitu. Ivy looked up, her voice trembling yet resolute. "If I stay, will you stay with me? Always?" Trying to hide her embarrassment, she turned her head away and added softly, "After all, I have no family here." Bifetu froze, unable to believe what he had just heard. She had actually said yes. The mighty Pharaoh's composure broke, replaced by a boyish joy that he lifted Ivy into the air with a laugh of disbelief. Then he kissed her deeply. "We'll go to Memphis right now." Bifetu declared that it's the closest city. "We'll hold the ceremony there immediately." He made his promise with radiant certainty. "From this day forth, we'll appear together at every ceremony. Our likenesses will be painted side by side on the temple walls. And our statues will stand together atop the sanctuaries. I'll make you the greatest queen in Egypt, so that even 3,000 years from now, the world will still witness our love." Ivy was truly moved. His vow was so beautiful it frightened her. Frightened her because she was never meant to be part of this time, a traveler who had disturbed fate itself. Bifetu still had an empire to rule, a destiny to fulfill, and though Ivy would never see her father or brother again, here in this ancient world she had found a happiness deeper than anything she'd ever known. Gently, Bifetu set her back on the ground. He took her small satchel from a nearby guard, reached inside and pulled out the serpent-shaped golden bracelet. The key that allowed her to cross through time. It was the one thing he could never let her hold again. Then, with a wave of his hand, Bifetu commanded the entire escort to set out for Memphis. In that moment, Ivy realized she truly had no way back to her own time. Yet deep inside, Ivy felt a flicker of unease. Could she really stay here forever and live beside Bifetu for the rest of her life? After she agreed to remain in Egypt, Bifetu wasted no time. He took her straight to Memphis to prepare for the wedding ceremony. As soon as they entered the bustling city, Ivy's eyes lit up at the sight of the vibrant marketplace, her body itching to explore. But Bifetu immediately wrapped his arms around her. "You're about to become Egypt's queen," he said firmly. "You can't just wander around a place like this." He even stopped her when she tried to remove her headscarf. In his mind, he was already her fiancé. It was only then that Ivy realized all she had agreed to was staying in Egypt. She never actually said she'd marry him. Come to think of it, there hadn't been any romantic proposal, no ring, no question of consent. The more she thought about it, the more irritated she became. "Ugh, typical alpha male nonsense," she grumbled inwardly. Soon they arrived at the palace in Memphis, every bit as opulent as the capital in Thebes. The maids escorted Ivy into a lavish chamber, and the moment the doors opened, she froze in astonishment. The room was filled with exquisite garments and jewelry, each one glittering with priceless craftsmanship. Ivy suddenly remembered that since returning to ancient Egypt, she had never properly dressed up, always wearing practical unisex clothing. But mostly it was because traditional Egyptian women's clothes were far too restrictive for movement, so she politely declined the maid's offer of luxurious attire. Pointing at one of the maids, she smiled. "Just give me a set like hers, that'll do." After bathing and changing, Ivy felt refreshed, her body light and her mind clear. But the peace didn't last long. Soon she was bored again. "If only Shepet were here," she thought, "that we could sneak out of the palace and have some fun." The maids, surprised by how playful the Pharaoh's beloved was, decided to call in a troupe of dancers and singers to entertain her. It was Ivy's first time watching a traditional Egyptian performance up close. The bright costumes and rhythmic movements were fascinating. Meanwhile, in the council hall, Bifetu was meeting with his ministers to discuss the details of the royal wedding. He wanted the ceremony to take place in just 3 days, but the court astrologers declared that the most auspicious date was 15 days away. The ritual itself was elaborate and would require at least 10 days of preparation. Bifetu didn't care. He slammed his staff down and declared, 7 days. Later that he had waited long enough. In 7 days, beneath the eyes of the gods, Ivy would finally become his wife. He refused to wait another moment. Still, there was another matter demanding his attention. The Hittite ambush on Buka's troops. The attack had been too precise to be coincidence. That could only mean one thing. There was a traitor among Egypt's high ranks, someone leaking military intelligence to the enemy. And so, Bifetu decreed that from this day forward, all military plans would be discussed by only 2 people, himself and Mentis. To prevent any leaks, Bifetu ordered that the soldiers be informed of their departure only 1 day in advance, and strictly forbade anyone from revealing the route to the temple priests. After finishing his work, he made his way to the courtyard where Ivy was staying. By then, Ivy had already fallen fast asleep amid the lively performances. Seeing her peaceful face, Bifatu gently lifted her into his arms, letting her rest against his chest. Though everyone in Egypt knew of the pharaoh's love for Nefertary, none could believe their eyes as they watched him now, the ruler of a nation, gazing down with such tender affection. Even in her sleep, Ivy murmured praises for the dancers, smiling faintly. Amused, Bifatu rewarded the performers generously. The courtyard burst into laughter and joy. The attendants whispered among themselves, with this kind, gentle girl as Egypt's queen, perhaps the kingdom's future truly would be brighter. Later, when Ivy slowly awoke, she was startled to see Bifatu's chiseled face right in front of hers, and realized she had been sleeping on his arm the whole time. Her cheeks flushed scarlet. "Why are you here?" she stammered. Bifatu replied casually, "This is my palace that I can sleep wherever I like." Then with a teasing smile he added, "Besides, why be shy? Sooner or later we'll be sleeping together anyway." Just as Ivy was trying to come up with a comeback, Bifatu interrupted her, telling her to wrap herself up properly. He was taking her to the marketplace. The moment she heard the words go out together, Ivy's eyes sparkled. "Our first date," she exclaimed, leaving Bifatu utterly confused by the strange phrase. On her way to change clothes, she nearly tripped over a jar. Watching her stumble and fluster about, Bifatu felt both amused and tender. In that instant he silently swore he would never let her go no matter what. When they reached the lively marketplace, Ivy's eyes widened with excitement, ready to shop to her heart's content. But before she could take a step, Bifatu grabbed her from behind and began wrapping her tightly in layers of silk scarves, turning her into a perfectly sealed princess dumpling. No matter how much she protested, he refused to let even an inch of her skin show. A short distance away, two beautiful women caught sight of them, or rather of Bifatu's impossibly handsome profile. Sharing a quick glance, they nodded to each other and made their move. Approaching from both sides, they brushed past him deliberately, shoving Ivy aside in the process. Seeing their shamelessly love-struck expressions, Ivy's temper flared instantly. Her jealousy was about to explode. Without another word, Ivy grabbed Bifatu and yanked him away from the two women. Clinging to him like an octopus, she shot the girls a death glare. Her expression screamed, "He's mine. Don't even think about looking. This is how we walk when we go on dates where I'm from," she said righteously. Bifatu, however, wasn't focused on the walking part. So he asked with a hint of jealousy, "You've gone on dates like this before?" "Wait, what?" Ivy almost choked on air. Desperate to change the subject, she blurted, "Actually, Nefertary wasn't my real name. I only borrowed it back then." Looking straight at him, she said softly, "My real name is Ivy." When Bifatu repeated her name for the first time, Ivy, the way it rolled off his tongue, sent a strange warmth through her chest. She crouched down and began drawing on the ground, explaining, "The way in my name means rose. It's my favorite flower." Pointing to the small drawing, she added, "You Egyptians use hieroglyphs, right? Then remember this flower. It's my name." Bifatu smiled gently and nodded. "I'll remember." Ivy quickly turned her head away. Lately, whenever Bifatu looked at her that way, her face would flush red, her ears would burn, and her heart would pound uncontrollably. Just then, a guard approached Bifatu and whispered something in his ear. Ivy blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized their date had been shadowed by soldiers the entire time. Her curiosity was quickly drawn to the message itself. Princess Amunra had arrived in Memphis. She was the very woman Yari had mentioned, the true traitor who conspired with the Hittites. Now that she had come straight to them, Ivy decided she would find a chance to expose the princess's true identity. Amunra was known as the girl who could speak with the gods. Guided by divine prophecy, her predictions were said to never fail. It was this gift that had helped her marry the man she loved, her own brother, the pharaoh Bifatu. She came to Memphis claiming she wished to congratulate her brother on his upcoming wedding, but her revelation told a different story. Ivy, she said, could not become queen of Egypt. The oracle declared, "The golden-haired maiden does not belong to Egypt. Her presence will bring war and misfortune upon the kingdom." The words struck Ivy's heart like an arrow. Deep down, she knew ever since she arrived in this era, her existence had been changing the fate of others. Even if the prophecy sounded absurd, she couldn't completely deny its truth. Amunra continued, "If my brother insists on this marriage, then let the girl undergo the judgment of the gods. Let the divine decide whether she is fit to be Egypt's queen." Bifatu's temper finally snapped. "Enough," he roared. "Stop with your nonsense. You will remain here in Memphis and you will not leave." Amunra, however, remained calm, bowing gracefully. I only speak the will of the gods. A single lie would sever my connection to them. With that she saluted and left the hall. Ivy, puzzled, looked up at Bifatu. What's the judgment of the gods? But his expression hardened, his tone cold. It doesn't concern you. Later, Ivy learned from Buko what the so-called judgment of the gods truly was. A person would be locked in a sealed chamber for one full day and night, their fate left entirely to the gods. To Ivy it sounded completely unreasonable, a system far too easy for humans to manipulate. If I were thrown into that room, she thought grimly, wouldn't it be easy for someone to slip in at night and kill me? Curious, she asked why Amunra was known as the girl who speaks with the gods. 4 years ago, when Amunra was only 11, she had suddenly predicted a Hittite border raid with uncanny accuracy. At first, no one believed her. But as her prophecies kept coming true, predicting the Hittites' movements, their attack timing, even which Egyptian officials would be assassinated, every single one proved correct. The late Pharaoh was overjoyed. After consulting with the temple priests, he officially declared her the girl who speaks with the gods, granting her divine status. Yet Ivy quickly noticed something strange. Nearly every one of Amunra's divine revelations was related to the Hittites. Thinking in reverse made the truth obvious. Though her motives were still unclear, Ivy was certain now Amunra was the traitor hiding right beside the pharaoh. Seeing the look in her eyes, Buka asked softly, "Do you really want to be queen that badly? You'll draw envy and a pharaoh's love may not last forever." Ivy smiled faintly. "I know. But I don't care about being queen. I just want to stay with Bifatu." That same night, Amunra quietly slipped into the pharaoh's study. Just as Amunra reached for the sealed decree of Egypt's campaign against the Hittites, Ivy and her guards burst into the study, catching her red-handed. Yet even then, Amunra showed no fear or guilt. She calmly insisted she had done nothing wrong. She was simply following the will of the gods. Staring into her clear, innocent eyes, Ivy saw no deceit. Amunra's faith was pure and absolute. She truly believed in her god. Ivy almost couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. The so-called girl who speaks with the gods was, in truth, part of a plot the Hittites had begun 4 years earlier. They had deliberately fed Amunra minor pieces of false intelligence, then let her repeat them as divine revelations, and soon, all of Egypt believed in her supposed gift. But Amunra protested furiously, calling it nonsense. She claimed she had never betrayed Egypt nor spoken with any Hittite, that she had only ever spoken with her god. Ivy realized she wasn't lying. The problem wasn't with Amunra, but with the god she trusted. Ivy asked her to describe what that god looked like. Egyptians and Hittites looked very different. Their features alone could reveal the truth. Amunra thought for a moment. She admitted she had only met the god once. Afterward, she had communicated through his so-called messengers. She remembered vividly his eyes were a deep ocean blue, and he had promised to make her special, to grant her the right to stand beside her beloved brother. From that day on, the young princess believed wholeheartedly the god she met was none other than Yari, the Hittites' hidden lord. Suddenly, a deep voice cut through the silence. Bifatu had arrived. Picking up the thread of conversation, he spoke coldly. "The ruler behind the Hittites, Yari, is known by 2 marks: a dark violet banner with black sigils, and eyes as cold and blue as ice." Amunra froze, her heart sinking. She desperately wanted anyone to tell her it wasn't true, that the god she worshipped wasn't Yari. But every fact pointed to the same cruel truth. The god she had devoted her faith to was her brother's greatest enemy. Amunra glared at Ivy, her blue eyes burning with disbelief and pain. And in that moment, memories of the day her fate changed came rushing back. She had been a child then, playing in the royal gardens, when a mysterious man appeared before her. With a teasing smile, he asked, "Tell me, little princess, can you keep a secret?" Offended, Amunra puffed up with pride. "If I ever fail to keep one, may I never marry my beloved brother," she declared. The man laughed, loud and mocking, which only fueled her anger. She turned away, cheeks flushed, refusing to speak to him until his next words froze her in place. "I can make you special," he said softly. "I can make your wish come true, to stand beside your brother." From that day forward, Amunra bore what she believed to be a divine duty: to deliver the god's messages to Egypt, and to report all of Egypt's affairs back to him. In the end, she achieved everything she desired, hailed as the girl who speaks with the gods, and wed to her beloved brother under the name of a holy union. And so, her faith in that god, her devotion and reverence grew deeper than ever. Everything changed the moment Amunra learned that Ivy was to marry Bifatu to become Queen of Egypt. For the first time, Amunra forged a divine prophecy, declaring the golden-haired maiden does not belong to Egypt. Her presence will bring war and misfortune. At first, guilt gnawed at her. She knew she was lying, betraying both her people and the god she worshipped. But as the royal ceremony kept getting delayed, she watched in disbelief as her false prophecy worked, even better than she had imagined. For the first time she felt the full intoxicating power of being the girl who speaks with the gods. So when the god appeared again, demanding that she reveal Egypt's next military route, she hesitated, knowing it would endanger her homeland, but fear of losing her divine gift consumed her. Desperate to remain the chosen one, she did as commanded and sought out the war decree. But what she found was a nightmare. The god she had served was Egypt's greatest enemy, and the divine girl herself was nothing more than a puppet, a traitor unknowingly used by the Hittites. Shattered, Amunra dropped to her knees, begging her brother to tell her it wasn't true. But Bifatu's fury was overwhelming. He ordered everyone out of the chamber, his voice like thunder. What happened here? No one will speak of it. If a single word escapes this room, you will die. As his sister knelt trembling before him, tears streaming down her face, Bifatu's anger faded to sorrow. He asked quietly, Amunra, is there anything else you've kept from me? But when Amunra lifted her head and saw Ivy standing behind Bifatu, the remorse in her eyes vanished. Over the years she had already dealt with every woman who tried to cling to her brother, the ones he favored, the ones he loved, the ones who dared to dream of him. None of them were needed. Those he married didn't love him. Those he loved didn't deserve him. They all deserved to die. Even if she was no longer the girl who speaks with the gods, Amunra still believed she was the only one who truly belonged at Bifatu's side. In an instant she drew a dagger from her sleeve and lunged at Ivy. Her mind screamed in chaos. She could shut her ears, cloud her thoughts, lie to herself. But as long as that golden-haired girl kept breathing, she would always know, her beloved brother's heart would never be hers again. At the last possible second, Bifatu caught the blade with his bare hand. Blood splattered across the marble floor. And before anyone could react, something even more shocking happened. Buka stepped forward and drove his sword straight through Amunra's chest. Buka, stop this madness, Mentis shouted, horrified that she's the princess. But Buka's eyes were cold, his voice unwavering. To raise a weapon against the pharaoh is treason. Royal blood is no exception. Ivy was frozen, unable to understand how Buka could act with such ruthless resolve. All she could do now was stop him. Don't pull the sword out, she pleaded silently, because if he did, Amunra would bleed out and die within seconds. In that moment, Amunra seemed to let go of her fear of death. To her, dying was merely a passage from one world into another. She didn't fear dying. What she feared was never seeing her beloved brother again. If that was to be her fate, then she only wished for one thing, that he would never forget her. A low, chilling laugh escaped her lips. Ignoring Bifatu's desperate shouts, Amunra gripped the sword that pierced through her body. With a violent pull, she tore the blade free. Blood poured from the wound, spilling over her trembling hands. Raising those blood-stained hands high, she cried out hoarsely, her voice echoing through the chamber. Nefertary, I curse you. May you suffer as I have torn from the one you love. May you be as worthless in his heart as I am in his. Until the day he dies for you, my curse will never fade. Enough, Bifatu roared, fury blazing in his eyes. Amunra, stop this madness. But in her final moments, Amunra could only stare at him, the man she loved more than life itself, and see only hatred in his eyes, hatred born for another woman's sake. With her last strength, she reached for his hand, the same hand that still held the dagger he had once gifted her as a child. Pulling the blade free, she whispered weakly, remember this, my brother. Only you can kill me. It was your coldness that ended my life. Then without hesitation she turned the blade inward and plunged it into her heart. Bifatu's cry filled the hall, but it was too late. Amunra collapsed into a pool of blood, her final expression twisted with sorrow and resentment. She hated this world, and the brother who no longer loved her. Ramses II Bifatu had lost completely. His sister, the one he swore to protect, was deceived, broken, and died before his eyes. His loyal friend was suspected, his love tainted. All because of one cruel trick, a game set in motion by Yari, the shadow lord of the Hittites, and it left the mighty pharaoh utterly defeated. Since that day, Ivy hadn't seen Bifatu for 3 whole days. She went through the motions as usual, trying on one wedding gown after another. The etiquette instructor's endless lectures about posture, tone, and ritual nearly lulled her to sleep. Finally, Ivy couldn't take it anymore. She slipped away, leaving everyone behind. Deep down, she feared the worst, that Bifatu might once again try to bury his pain by hurting himself, just as he had after Lita's death. When she arrived outside the Pharaoh's chambers, she braced herself for the guards to block her as before. To her surprise, they stepped aside. Bifatu had given orders Ivy was to be admitted any time without announcement. Only then did she realize he had been waiting for her all along. Inside, Bifatu sat alone, gazing into the distance. His solitary silhouette, framed by the fading light, made her heart ache. Is this really the ending I wanted? She wondered. After all the guessing, suspicion, and struggle, was it all just a tragic farce? She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him from behind. She had returned to this time to save his life, to rewrite his fate, yet so many questions still had no answers. She didn't even know if she had truly succeeded. Ivy had come to comfort him, but before she knew it, her own tears were falling. Bifatu turned, drawing her gently into his embrace, wiping her tears away with tender hands. He no longer spoke of the past. Instead, he asked softly, "Tell me about your world, Ivy. I want to know everything about you." Ivy smiled through her tears. That, she said quietly, isn't something I can explain in just a few words. Ivy began telling him about her world, a world of electricity, cities that never sleep, and skies lit by towers instead of stars. She mentioned that she had once written an article about Ramses II, the great pharaoh who led Egypt into an age of glory and prosperity. But when she mentioned the records that said the pharaoh had over 100 wives and countless descendants, Bifatu's brow immediately furrowed. In the next breath, he pulled her tightly into his arms. From now on, he whispered, there will be only you. You'll be my only queen. However many children you bear, that's how many heirs I'll have. Ivy smiled softly and hugged him back. From the moment she chose to stay, she had already accepted whatever changes history might bring. Whether Bifatu pleaded like a child for her never to leave, or vowed to become colder and crueler for the sake of power, her heart would never waver again. And no matter what came, she would always stay by his side. Many years later, a man traveled across the desert to the ruins of Memphis. There was an old legend that those who had once drunk from the Nile would one day return to Egypt. As he took a single step forward, the silent ruins came alive with sound and light. Voices rose all around him, chanting in unison, Ramses, Nefertary. Ison stared in disbelief, his heart trembling as history seemed to awaken before his very eyes. Then something even stranger happened. Two elegantly dressed figures emerged from the temple's great hall. One of them was his long-lost sister. She was walking arm in arm with a man he didn't recognize, their closeness so natural it made Ison's heart tighten in disbelief. The sudden shout of his guide snapped him out of the vision. The scene had been so vivid, so lifelike, that Ison could hardly believe it wasn't real. Leaving the guide behind, he stepped alone into the ruins. Somewhere within these stones, he was certain, lay the truth behind Ivy's disappearance. His search led him to a small, time-worn shop, the very place where he had once bought the golden bracelet he'd given Ivy. When he asked the old shopkeeper about the bracelet's origin, the man didn't answer directly. Instead, he began a tale. Over 100 years ago, the shopkeeper said, voice rough and low, "For young Englishmen came here and purchased the mummy of an Egyptian princess. Soon after, each of them met a tragic death. Later, the mummy was sent to the British Museum and the disasters continued there as well. In desperation, the museum arranged for the mummy to be shipped to New York. But that ship carrying 1,500 souls sank into the Atlantic. You may know it by its name, the Titanic." The man's voice dropped to a whisper, and the mummy's name was Amunra. The story was dramatic, but Ison didn't flinch. He knew the so-called curse of Princess Amunra had long been debunked, a mix-up born from mistranslating the words priestess of Ammonius Ray. Cutting him off, Ison said flatly, "Enough with the ghost stories. I'm not here to buy souvenirs." But Ison had overlooked one crucial detail. The shop had only ever sold a single item in its entire history, the serpent-shaped golden bracelet. His expression hardened. He drew his gun, pointing it directly at the man. "Why did you sell that bracelet to me?" "Why me?" The man didn't flinch. "You're right," he said calmly. "The mummy's curse was a myth. But the 4 young Englishmen who bought the princess's body, they were real. One was struck by a carriage. Another died in war, the third of illness. And the last, he continued softly, wandered into the desert, and was never seen again. The old man raised his head slowly, his eyes hollow but burning with a strange light. That I was that last man, that I've been here, guarding Princess Amunra's remains for 117 years. I cannot die, he whispered, and I cannot leave this room. For more than a century, you're the only one who's ever come through that door. I thought if you took the bracelet the curse would end, but I didn't know, you had a golden-haired, blue-eyed sister. Suddenly, a voice echoed inside Isen's mind, deep, ancient and mournful. It whispered again and again, Nefertary, Nefertary. The man went pale, trembling as he fell to his knees before the sarcophagus. Forgive me, princess. I never meant to please. The heavy lid of the coffin began to slide open from within. A shadow rose chanting words of a long-forgotten curse. That it was Princess Amunra, risen from her 3,000-year slumber. Isen froze in terror. The air itself seemed to tighten around him, thick with the cold scent of death. Amunra froze for a brief, breathless moment. She couldn't move. Before her stood a man who looked exactly like the one who had deceived her and stolen her happiness, Ragnar, the false god she once worshipped. And the cruelest joke of all, this man now existed as the brother of that accursed woman. Amunra threw back her head and laughed, a wild, broken laugh that echoed through the tomb like madness itself. Isen didn't understand a word of what she was saying. Instinct screamed danger. He raised his gun and fired. The bullet struck her arm, but instead of bleeding, the limb simply fell off, crumbling to ash the moment it hit the ground. Isen's pulse raced as Amunra kept walking toward him, completely unfazed by the barrage of bullets tearing through her body. For centuries, she shrieked, I've guarded the golden bracelet, waiting for that golden-haired woman to return, so I could kill her myself. And you sold it to another. Isen could barely follow her words. All he knew was that the golden bracelet had taken Ivy away from this world. Amunra faltered, confusion flashing across her hollow eyes. Wait, was it I who sent Nefertary back to my brother? That name Nefertary struck something deep in Isen's memory. That he remembered Ivy mentioning it once, while writing her paper on Ramses II, his beloved queen. No, Amunra screamed, voice cracking, that she's not his queen. She doesn't deserve him. She lifted her right hand, and the air twisted violently, shadows and sand began swirling around her, reality itself warping under her curse. The kneeling man whispered weakly, the golden bracelet. It's the nexus between worlds. Once it's gone, this false reality will vanish too. With those words, his body dissolved into a stream of golden dust, swallowed by the chaos that filled the room. Amunra kept spinning in her frenzied dance, her movements bending the air around her as if space itself was tearing apart. For 3,000 years she had slept waiting for this single moment. A wicked smile curved across her pale lips. So this is fate's design. Rejoice, Ragnar, I'll send you to the sister you love so dearly. She lifted her arms high, chanting wildly, surprised face gods across 3 millennia, hear my plea. Let this cruel man taste the agony I endured, let him carry out my curse. Before Isen could react, a burst of blinding light engulfed him, his body dissolved into the distortion, swallowed by the rippling void. Will you be the wife of Egypt's greatest pharaoh? The soft question floated through the light. Before a shimmering sea of golden roses, Ramses Biffatus stood gazing deeply into Ivy's eyes. In a voice gentle as the Nile's breeze, he whispered his plea for her to become his queen, to finally give her the romantic proposal she deserved. Ignoring all royal customs, he had secretly brought her here before the grand ceremony. The sight overwhelmed Ivy. Her mind went completely blank. Flustered, she pushed him away and hid her blushing face. In our world, she stammered, a proposal means kneeling on one knee. Bifida blinked, utterly baffled. Kneel? What kind of strange ritual is that? In Egypt, only the god Amunra was worthy of such reverence. No one had ever dared to ask a pharaoh to kneel. Realizing how absurd her words sounded, Ivy quickly covered her mouth, her cheeks burning as she lowered her head in embarrassment. Just as Ivy turned to explain herself, Ramses Bifatu was already kneeling before her. The pharaoh of Egypt, the god among men, bowed on one knee beneath a sea of golden roses that shimmered like sunlight. For Ivy he would do anything. He took her hand gently, his voice low but steady. Will you be my only queen? Ivy never imagined that the greatest pharaoh in Egypt's history would humble himself for her. Tears welled in her eyes. She threw herself into his arms, whispering through her sobs, "I'm willing to give up the future. To stay here with you. I want to be your wife forever." They held each other beneath the golden roses as the wedding ceremony began. "O ancient Nile, great Amunra," she prayed softly, "bear witness to this love that defies time." From that moment Ramses was her husband and she his one and only queen. But in the midst of that dreamlike joy, the sky suddenly cracked with thunder. The cheering crowd froze in place, their smiles turned to lifeless stillness. A bolt of lightning struck the ground beside Ivy. A voice cold and hateful echoed through the storm. It was Amunra's curse. From a rift in space, a man stepped forth. For an instant, Ivy thought it was Ragnar. But as the light cleared, her heart nearly stopped. It was her brother, Ison. Ramses drew his sword ready to strike, but Ivy screamed and ran between them. "No. Stop. That's my brother, not Ragnar." Before she could finish, a gunshot rang out. Blood splattered across the golden petals. Ramses the Pharaoh who once ruled the world fell to the ground, crimson soaking into the roses that were meant to bless their eternity. Ison ignored Ivy's cries and pulled her into the swirling rift of time. The world folded in on itself. Light and shadow twisted until both of them vanished, leaving only the sea of roses and blood-stained sand behind. They had once drunk from the Nile together, promising never to part, a vow meant to defy time itself. But now that very promise had become the wall that separated them forever. Just as Amunra's curse foretold, her hatred pierced 3,000 years of history, binding Ivy and Ramses in eternal separation. When Ivy opened her eyes again, harsh white light blinded her. She was lying on a hospital bed, hooked up to 4 tubes, her heart racing as if awakening from a dream too vivid to be real. Trembling, she reached for her phone and searched. The records told the truth. History had reset. Ramses II lived well into his 90s. He married more than 200 wives throughout his reign. His most beloved Nefertary, priestess of Amunra, was immortalized on temple walls, forever beside him. Ivy felt a strange comfort knowing he lived a long, glorious life. Yet her heart ached with unbearable emptiness, for nowhere in history did her name exist. "Did he forget me?" she whispered. Turning to her brother, tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'll never see him again, will I?" From that day on, Ivy became quiet, distant. No matter how kind Ison was, no matter how many gifts he gave, she could never stop hearing Ramses's voice echoing in her mind, "You're the only one I'll ever love. For eternity." Then a breaking news report on TV made Ivy freeze. Archaeologists had discovered a wall of roses in the ruins of Memphis, the very place where Ramses had once knelt to propose to her. Her heart raced. She had to go back. Somewhere there, she knew, lay the answer she'd been searching for. Ison couldn't understand her obsession, but he pulled her close, whispering, "Forget him. Let the past go. I can give you the same promise he did." The man who shared her blood had once been the one she adored most. Ramses's history no longer held her name. Perhaps it was time to forget, to accept the comfort her brother offered. But Ivy shook her head and gently pushed him away. "I promised him," she said softly, "I swore I'd stay by his side forever." Seeing her determination, Ison said nothing more. He simply chose to go with her, to stand beside her one last time. The Nile still flowed endlessly, but the empire that once shone brighter than the sun had long turned to dust. Ivy ran through the crumbling ruins, her footsteps echoing among shattered stones. Though 3,000 years had passed, she found the wall instantly. The roses were gone, the carvings weathered, but this wall remained, the proof that she had once existed here. Then something caught her eye, a single stone etched with strange symbols. She remembered. That flower meant her name, Ivy. And beside it, a heart, the ancient sign of love. Together they formed a message. "Love, Ivy." Her heart trembled. This was Ramses's mark, his memory of her. She refused to believe that the man who carved this would ever break his vow, that he would return to history's script and take hundreds of other brides. Suddenly, the stone loosened and fell from the wall with a dull thud. Behind it, to Ivy's astonishment, lay the serpent-shaped golden bracelet. Her key through time, her last bond to Ramses. Ison's eyes widened, that he already knew what she intended to do. Though worn and weathered, the wall still carried the tenderness of every carved rose, each petal whispering the love once sealed within. He could feel it too, that man must have loved Ivy as deeply as he did. And he understood. Her heart had room for only one person. Gently, Ison lifted Ivy's hand and kissed it. No matter where you go, he said softly, I'll always be there, watching over you. Then, fighting back the ache in his chest, he turned away. The bracelet, he reminded her, is the link between worlds. Once it disappears, that false time will vanish too. As his words faded, a burst of golden light engulfed the ruins. Ivy's figure blurred, dissolving into the glow, and was gone. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing in a vast desert beneath a burning sky. She looked down at the bracelet. Cracks ran across its surface. One more time, she whispered. Maybe it'll only work once more. She turned in circles, sand swirling around her. She couldn't tell where or when she was. Just then, a caravan appeared in the distance. Its leader greeted her warmly and said, You're in Syria. Damascus is only half a day away. When she asked about Egypt, he replied, The Pharaoh is still Ramses. Relief washed over her. She was back in the right era. The merchant studied her closely. Your golden hair, your blue eyes, are they real? Ivy smiled faintly and nodded. After a pause, the merchant led over a camel. Follow the southwest trail, he said kindly. Once you cross the Red Sea, you'll find your way to Egypt. Before parting, Ivy learned from the merchant that it was now the 5th year of Ramses's reign. To her, the journey through time had lasted only a moment, but in this world, 10 long years had already passed. She couldn't imagine what that gap in time might mean. All she wanted now was to return to Ramses, to the man waiting beyond history. But fate had other plans. Ahead, shouts echoed through the dunes. A group of soldiers were chasing a man. The iron swords they wielded bore the crest of the Hittite Empire. Ivy turned to flee, but it was too late. She stumbled, falling hard onto the sand. Her scarf slipped free, revealing a cascade of golden hair. The soldiers froze, eyes wide in shock. The golden-haired girl. One of them shouted, Lord Ragnar's been searching for her. Then someone noticed the camel beside her. It bore the royal brand of General Tuth. Ivy's heart sank. The kind merchant who had helped her had been a Hittite soldier all along. She was being taken farther and farther from Egypt, and dread filled her chest. Would she ever see Ramses again? When Ragnar finally appeared before her, Ivy's breath caught. He looked so much like her brother. But she knew the truth. He wasn't Ison. He was the ruler behind the Hittite throne, Ragnar. When he asked where she had been these past 5 years, Ivy simply smiled faintly. I went home, she said. But she never told him that her home was 3,000 years away. Though Ragnar couldn't help but notice that Ivy looked exactly the same as years ago, he chose not to ask. Some secrets, especially those born from time itself, were better left untouched. But the moment he saw her again, something became painfully clear. Why would a man spend years chasing after a woman he had only met a handful of times? 5 years had passed, yet his obsession burned as fiercely as the day they met. The moment his fingers brushed her cheek, a surge of emotion, something between tenderness and madness, washed over him. He wanted her. Nothing else mattered. Not the war, not the throne, not even the gods. Ivy quickly pushed him away, trembling. I'm the queen of Egypt, she cried. I can't go with you to Hutti. Ragnar's smile was calm, but his words cut deep. Then stop dreaming of Egypt. Damascus has already fallen to us. He continued coldly, Syria was the key between our two empires. With it gone, Egypt stands defenseless. Ivy froze, disbelief flooding her heart. Why was Ramses still in Memphis doing nothing? Then Ragnar delivered the final blow. Ramses never took a queen. Egypt has forgotten the golden-haired priestess, forgotten Nefertary. Even if you return now, he said quietly, you'll never be his queen again. Ivy shook her head violently. No, I don't believe it. Even if the world forgets me, he won't. He can't. Her voice trembled. Unless I see it with my own eyes. Ragnar looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. Very well, he said. Then I'll go with you to Egypt. Before they left, Ragnar made a wager. If that man truly no longer needs you, he said calmly, then you must come back to Hutti with me completely. They set off that very day. Unlike Ivy, who was tense and uneasy, Ragnar seemed perfectly at ease. Along the road, he looked almost joyful. Even the stars above seemed to sparkle like jewels in his eyes. Ivy couldn't understand him. You're the ruler behind the Hittite Empire, she said. Can you really just walk away like this? Ragnar only smiled, unbothered. It doesn't matter, he said softly. I was never one of them. I'm Canaanite, what others call a Phoenician. Ivy of course knew that the Phoenicians were the first seafaring power in human history. brilliant minds, born traders, masters of commerce. Yet Ragnar himself never became one of those great merchants of the sea. The foolish son of the Hittite king once rejected their cargo, and because of that arrogance his parents were executed. He seized control of Hutti only to avenge them, never because he cared for the empire's future. But Ragnar was only an adopted child. He never knew where he truly came from, and from childhood, his blue eyes made him an outcast among his own people. Whether among the Phoenicians or the Hittites, he never belonged anywhere. Until the day he met Ivy, the girl who shared those same blue eyes. For the first time he felt he wasn't alone. From that moment, a single thought grew inside him. He wanted to take her away from everything. "If you'll stay with me," he whispered, "I'll give up my throne, my wealth, my name. Wherever you go, I'll follow." Caught off guard by Ragnar's heartfelt confession, Ivy turned her face away, cheeks burning red. He didn't care whether she answered or not. He simply wanted her to know what was in his heart, how much he wished this journey could go on forever. He'd even chosen the slowest camel on purpose, yet Damascus was still far too close to Memphis. After only 3 days on the road, they finally arrived at the ancient capital. Ragnar told Ivy to follow his lead. From now on, they were to pose as a pair of merchant siblings fleeing from Syria. When he called her by her real name, Ivy froze for a moment. The way he said it sounded exactly like her brother. Ragnar tapped her forehead gently. "Don't drift off," he teased. "We're here to see if Egypt has truly forgotten you." They picked a random girl passing by. Ragnar, staying in character, asked her for directions with that charming face and a few smooth, cheesy lines. He had her flustered in seconds. The poor girl blushed bright red, stammering shyly, while Ivy watched from the side, gagging a little as she muttered, "Ugh, that was disgusting." Ivy couldn't hold it in any longer. She cut into their conversation and asked the one question that had been burning inside her: what happened to Queen Nefertary? The girl blinked in surprise, then smiled. "You came at the perfect time. The Pharaoh is set to marry Nefertary next month. She'll be his first queen. And she's said to be Egypt's greatest oracle. Her blessings will bring prosperity to the land." The words hit Ivy like thunder. She knew exactly who the girl meant, yet she refused to believe it. She grabbed the girl's hand, trembling. "What about the blonde Nefertary? Have you seen her?" The girl's expression changed instantly. Fear flashed across her face. "I don't know anyone like that. I've never heard of her," she stammered before running off in panic. Refusing to give up, Ivy chased her into a narrow alley. After much pleading, the terrified girl finally whispered the truth. Years ago, the Pharaoh issued a decree to erase the blonde girl from existence. Every statue, painting, and record of her was destroyed. Anyone who dared speak her name had their tongue cut out. During the royal wedding 5 years ago, the Pharaoh was stabbed and the blonde girl vanished at that exact moment. No one saw how it happened, but the council agreed. It was the blonde girl who attacked him. It happened before the god Amunra himself. Now Egypt has forgotten her completely. Ivy swayed on her feet, her vision blurring. Was this why fate had dragged her back here, to prove that every vow Ramses made to her had long since turned to dust? The vows they once swore beneath the desert sun had long been swept away by time. Ramses was now to marry the true Nefertary as his first queen, and there was no longer a place in Egypt for Ivy. She sat before Ragnar, lost in a daze, her eyes hollow as if her soul had drifted far away. When she finally came to, she found herself surrounded by Hittite soldiers, their caravan moving westward under the burning sunset, leaving Memphis behind. "You've lost," Ragnar said quietly, "and the war is about to begin. Even if you don't wish it, I'll take you back to Hutti. I won't let you be harmed, not again." In that moment, Ivy thought of her brother, the one who had once promised, "No matter where you are, I'll always be there to protect you." In this ancient world, only the man before her who looked exactly like her brother still cared about her safety. Only those same ocean blue eyes could truly understand the pain and loneliness buried within her heart. For a fleeting moment she wavered. Perhaps staying by his side wouldn't be so bad after all. But then the golden bracelet on her wrist began to glow, burning with a heat like the sun itself. Ivy's gaze sharpened with resolve. Whether or not Ramses had forgotten her, she had to see the truth with her own eyes. Ivy suddenly snatched Ragnar's dagger and pressed it to her throat, the blade slicing a thin line of blood. "Let me go back to Memphis," she pleaded, voice trembling, "or I'll die right here." "Don't," Ragnar said softly, sorrow clouding his eyes. "Please don't hurt yourself. Put the knife down or the horses can't even turn back. As Ivy hesitated for a heartbeat, he lunged forward and wrapped her tightly in his arms. The blade slipped and cut across his chest, staining his robe crimson. Ivy froze, dropping the dagger in shock as guilt flashed across her face. But Arya Ragnar only held her tighter that he never imagined she would be willing to die for that man, and compared to the ache in his heart, the wound on his body was nothing. "All right," he whispered, his voice barely steady, "I'll take you back to Memphis. But just let me hold you for a moment." After that he rode without rest, the desert wind howling as they raced toward the city. When the golden walls of Memphis finally appeared in the distance, Arya Ragnar's tone turned cold. "If you lose this bet," he warned, "you'll come back with me willingly. Run as far as you like, I'll still find you." Ivy had never truly thought about what would happen if she lost. She had only agreed to the wager for one reason: to find her way back to Ramses' side. At first, Ivy truly believed that once they met again, Ramses would remember the promise they made. But as the journey dragged on, that belief began to crumble, weighed down by a growing sense of despair. On this day, all of Memphis was alive with celebration. Today was the royal wedding of Ramses and Nefertary. It was here, in this very city, that Ivy and Ramses had once vowed to be each other's only one. Now, she had come to see with her own eyes whether he had broken that vow. When the real Nefertary appeared, Ivy froze. She was radiant, more beautiful than ever, her grace and nobility shining even brighter than before. She was the rightful queen of Ramses II. Standing there, Ivy suddenly felt she no longer even had the right to exist beside her. Maybe it was time to accept the truth. Just then the crowd erupted in thunderous cheers. The great Pharaoh of Egypt had arrived. Ramses rode in on his stallion, dressed in his iconic peacock green robes, blazing with divine majesty, the same sun-born god she remembered from 5 years ago. Ivy finally saw him again, the man who had haunted her dreams for so long, and for a moment, it felt as if nothing had ever changed. Ivy couldn't help it, she wanted to call out Ramses' name. But no matter how strong her longing was, her voice never reached him. Arya Ragnar quickly covered her mouth, whispering sharply, "Quiet. Do you have any idea how many people in Egypt want you dead?" Ramses was right there, so close she could almost touch him, yet he felt farther away than ever before. She wanted to ask him just once why. Even if it meant being hated by all, even if the gods themselves turned away from her, she would accept any punishment. Ivy turned to Arya Ragnar, guilt flickering in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then without hesitation she shouted, "Help! The Hittites are after me," and bolted into the crowd. Deep down she knew Arya Ragnar would protect her just like her brother once did, and for a fleeting moment she thought, if only the man I loved were him, how simple, how peaceful life would be. But perhaps both of them had already lost. For the man before her, Ivy was willing to give up everything, even her life. Soon, a soldier rushed to Ramses' side, reporting that a golden-haired woman was being pursued by Hittite assassins. Ramses' expression darkened. "Secure the crowd," he ordered coldly. "Bring the culprit back to the palace for questioning." Without another word, he turned his horse and rode away from the wedding grounds. Soon, Ivy was brought into the palace, where the old minister Sherman personally conducted her interrogation. "This matter is of great importance," Ivy said firmly. "I must deliver my report directly to Pharaoh himself." Sherman gave a cold laugh. "If you don't speak now, you won't ever have the chance," he sneered, then turned to the guards. "Lock her in the dungeon, she'll await execution." Just then Ramses entered the hall, his presence silenced everyone. "Who gave you the authority," he demanded, "to interrogate a prisoner without my command?" He suspected the woman's message might concern the war, too valuable to ignore. Ramses walked straight to his throne, his voice deep and commanding. "Raise your head," he said. "Speak." His tone was so close, so familiar, it sent shivers down Ivy's spine. That if she spoke he would hear her. But what would happen when he realized who she was? Would he kill her, or forgive her? When she still said nothing, Ramses' patience broke. "Take her away," he ordered coldly. Ivy's heart clenched. If she missed this moment, there might never be another chance. There was too much she wanted to tell him, too much left unsaid. Suddenly she gathered all her courage and cried out his name, "Ramses." The moment he heard that voice, the voice that had haunted his dreams for years, Ramses froze. His composure shattered in an instant. With trembling hands and a storm of emotions in his eyes, he reached out and lifted the veil from Ivy's face. As Ivy's golden hair fell loose, the entire throne hall froze in silence. Every pair of eyes widened in shock because in Egypt, a golden-haired woman was the omen of death. For 5 long years, speaking her name meant losing one's tongue. Anyone daring to mimic that hair color was executed on the spot by the pharaoh's own decree. Now after all those years Ramses finally saw her again. He gave a bitter, hollow laugh. No wonder I couldn't find you. You've been hiding with Ragnar all this time. Seeing the misunderstanding in his eyes, Ivy panicked. No. I came back to warn you. Hittite forces have already reached the border between Egypt and Syria. But Ramses showed no sign of relief or gratitude. His tone dripped with scorn. You think you can return from the enemy's land and speak of Egypt's affairs as if you still belong here? In a flash of rage he grabbed her by the hair, his voice trembling with fury. 5 years, Ivy. Why now? Why here? Don't tell me this has nothing to do with Ragnar. Behind them, Minister Sherman seized the chance to fan the flames. Your Majesty, he warned slyly, this woman may be a spy sent by Ragnar himself.